Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. Here's something wrong about silence. Real silence. The kind that presses on your skull, tightens around your chest, and makes you feel like the air itself is watching you. That's how it felt the night Nathan first saw the house. It wasn't just old, it was waiting. Waiting like something half awake, pretending to sleep until you stepped close enough. And Nathan, stupidly curious, had stepped closer. He hadn't meant to find it. He was supposed to be heading to the old construction, site off Route 17, where the town kids met to drink cheap beer and tell stories about the thing that used to live in the woods. But his car's GPS had glitched halfway through, rerouting him down an unmarked road that didn't exist on any map. He swore under his breath, checked his phone, but there was no signal. Only that cold, suffocating silence seeping in through the windows. Then he saw it through the trees. The faint outline of a house sitting deep in the blackness, where no light should reach. The headlights caught the edge of an iron gate, rusted and bent, its hinges groaning when the wind moved it. The name carved into the stone post was barely legible: Ashcroft Manor. He'd heard that name before, whispered at parties, mentioned like a curse people half believed in. A house that had swallowed its owners. People said it was built in 1903, but no one had lived there in nearly 70 years. Still, some swore they saw the upstairs lights flicker at night, like someone pacing the rooms. Nathan stared at it for a moment, his heart kicking in slow, heavy beats. He told himself he'd just take a picture, post it online, get a few laughs, and leave. But there was something magnetic about it. The way the structure seemed to lean forward, drawing him in. He pushed the gate open, and it screamed like metal tearing apart. The sound echoed into the woods, and everything after it fell silent again. The house loomed ahead, huge and broken, its windows black and uneven like hollow eyes. The porch sagged, the columns cracked, but the front door, it was perfect. Untouched, painted deep red, the only color left alive on the property. It didn't fit. It looked new. Like someone had painted it yesterday. He stood at the base of the porch steps, his phone raised to take a photo. But when he looked through the screen, the door wasn't red. It was open. Just slightly, enough to show a sliver of darkness inside. He lowered the phone and blinked. The door was shut again. His mouth went dry. Probably a glitch, he muttered, but the words sounded strange out loud. Too loud. The silence devoured them. A sound broke from inside, faint, like a footstep, or maybe a whisper brushing the walls. He froze. His brain screamed leave, but his hand reached out, almost against his will. The doorknob was cold, colder than ice. When he turned it, it moved without resistance, and the door creaked open into the dark. The air inside smelled like wet wood and old dust, but under it was something else, something metallic, sharp. Blood, he couldn't tell. He took a few steps in, his flashlight beam trembling. The foyer stretched before him, grand and decayed. Torn wallpaper, shattered chandelier. Portraits half faded on the walls. Every surface looked touched by time except one, the mirror above the fireplace. It gleamed like it had been polished just minutes ago. He moved closer, the beam of light sliding over the glass. His reflection stared back, pale and uneasy. Then, something behind him moved. A figure. He spun around, nothing. Empty hallways. He turned back to the mirror. Still just his reflection, breathing hard, eyes wide. But the problem was he hadn't raised his flashlight again. And yet, the figure standing behind his reflection was still lit. He stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. It clattered on the floor, flickering wildly. The beam landed on a pair of footprints, wet, smeared across the wooden floorboards, leading deeper into the house. They weren't his. Nathan's breath came shallow and fast. He turned to leave, but the door was gone. In its place was wallpaper, seamless and smooth. as if the doorway had never existed. He ran to it, slamming his hands against the wall, but it didn't give. His phone buzzed suddenly, the screen flashing with a notification even though it had no signal. The message was from an unknown number. "Welcome back." He froze, reading it again. "Back," he whispered. His thumb trembled as he typed a reply. "Who is this?" The screen flickered, then filled with static before another message appeared. "You shouldn't have left." The floor groaned behind him. Slow. Deliberate. Someone was walking down the hallway, one step at a time. He swung the flashlight toward the sound, but the beam sputtered out completely. Then came the whisper, so faint he almost thought it came from inside his own head. Upstairs. He swallowed hard. The whisper came again, clearer this time. "Upstairs, Nathan." He never told anyone his name. He took a step back, bumping into something solid. For a moment, he thought it was a wall. But it was warm. He turned, heart hammering, and his flashlight flickered back to life for half a second, long enough to see the outline of a man standing inches away. His face was wrong, stretched too wide, eyes black like pits, and his mouth moved in perfect sync with the whisper upstairs. The flashlight went out again. When it came back on, the man was gone. Nathan stumbled backward, running toward the staircase. The old steps groaned under his feet as he climbed, the air growing heavier with each step. He could hear something following, soft at first, then faster, louder, like hands dragging against the walls. When he reached the landing, he spun around, expecting to see the thing chasing him. But there was nothing. Only the mirror from the foyer. How could it be there now? At the top of the stairs. He stared into it and saw the downstairs hall reflected behind him. The front door was visible again, wide open, moonlight spilling in. He turned to run back down, but in the reflection, the door slowly swung shut, and standing in the open doorway was himself. His reflection smiled. Nathan's scream caught in his throat as he backed away from the mirror. The hallway seemed to stretch, the walls bending slightly, the wallpaper moving like it was breathing. He tripped over a loose floorboard and fell against a bedroom door. It swung open, and he tumbled inside. The room smelled like rotten flowers. Wilted petals covered the bed, blackened and dry. A single candle burned on the dresser, its flame motionless, not even flickering. Beside it sat an old photo album. He picked it up with shaking hands. The first page was a family portrait. 2 parents, a little boy, and a teenage girl. The faces were scratched out except for the boys. Nathan froze. It was him. Not similar. Him. He flipped the page. The next picture showed the same family, but older. The parents again scratched out, the girl now holding a man's hand. Nathan's stomach turned when he recognized the man. It was the same face from the mirror downstairs. He dropped the album. The candle went out instantly. Something moved behind him. A slow creak, like a door opening that wasn't supposed to exist. He turned, but the door to the hallway was gone. Instead, the room had stretched into darkness. The air was different now, colder, thicker. He saw a faint shape at the far end, a figure standing perfectly still, its outline barely visible, except for one detail, the glint of metal in its hand. It stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Nathan backed up until his spine hit the wall. The figure whispered again, the same voice that had called him upstairs. "You left us here." Nathan's head shook violently. "No." "I've never been here!" The figure stopped moving. The metal in its hand caught the light again. Not a weapon, a key. "You were the first," it whispered. The floorboards under Nathan's feet groaned, cracked, then caved in completely. He fell through the darkness, his body slamming into something cold and wet. His flashlight flickered on one last time before dying, and in that brief light, he saw what he'd landed on: faces. Dozens of them, twisted in silent screams, pressed into the floorboards like they were part of the wood itself. The smell was unbearable. Somewhere above, a door slammed. The sound echoed like thunder through the house. Then came the whisper again. right next to his ear, softer now, almost tender. Welcome home. Nathan didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. He wasn't sure there was still a night outside anymore. Every time he blinked, he saw the mirror, the red door, the message. He pressed his palms to the floor, and it pulsed under his hands, faintly like a heartbeat. Hours, or maybe days, passed. The candlelight never changed, the air never moved. He heard things upstairs, footsteps, a woman laughing, something dragging across the floor. He screamed until his voice broke, but the house only answered with more silence. Then, as suddenly as it began, the door appeared again. It was open. He crawled toward it, his limbs heavy, his mind half gone. He stepped into the hallway and found himself not in the house, but on his street. His car was parked where he'd left it, headlights still glowing. He stumbled toward it, shaking, crying, laughing. The night was normal again. Too normal. He climbed in, slammed the door, started the engine. The radio came to life, static hissing, then a voice. A woman's voice, soft and clear. And that concludes tonight's story. The House That Waited. Dedicated to our returning listener, Nathan Hayes. His hand froze on the steering wheel. The voice continued, cheerful and smooth. We missed you, Nathan. You always liked the ending best. The radio clicked off. He turned to look out the window and saw the house in the reflection of the rearview mirror. Not behind him, not far away, but standing exactly where his own house should have been. And in the upstairs window, his reflection waved. Nathan didn't remember getting home. The last thing he could recall with clarity was the radio's voice, calm, knowing, like it had been waiting for him to listen. The road had vanished. The night, the cold, the sound of that cursed house creaking behind him. Gone. He blinked and he was back in his driveway, engine still running, headlights aimed at the closed garage door, but something felt off, like the world around him had been rewound slightly. Not reset, just shuffled. He stepped out of the car with stiff limbs, his mind still echoing with the phrase, "You always liked the ending best." The sentence carried the weight of a memory he didn't recognize. He didn't even try his front door. Not yet. Instead, he stood in the driveway, staring at his reflection in the car's side mirror. For a brief, breathless second, he expected it to move on its own again. But it didn't. This time it was just him, sweaty, pale, wide-eyed. Then the porch light flicked on. Nathan whipped around. The motion sensor never worked. It had been dead for months. He slowly climbed the steps, his shoes hollow against the wood. The door stood half open. He hadn't left it that way. He knew he hadn't. His fingers grazed the handle, but he hesitated. What if this door wasn't the way out either? But the hallway inside looked like home. Familiar scuff marks on the walls. The smell of cinnamon air freshener. Like his sister used to spray around before company came over. And there, by the stairs, the dent in the drywall where he'd tripped carrying groceries last winter. Normal, safe. Except the silence was wrong again. No refrigerator hum. No faint ticking from the clock in the kitchen. Even the air felt thick, heavy with something unspoken. He moved through the house slowly, checking each room. His bedroom was untouched. Bed still unmade. Phone charger dangling off the nightstand. He grabbed the phone, half hoping it would offer a link back to reality. Full bars, no messages, no missed calls. He didn't realize his hands were shaking until he dropped the phone. It landed face up, the screen still lit. But something was different. The wallpaper, he had never changed it from the default, some abstract blue pattern. But now, it was a photo. A family photo. His family. Only, it wasn't one he remembered taking. His mother's face was turned away. His father's was blurry, distorted. His own image sat front and center, smiling, younger, maybe 10 years old. And behind him, barely visible between his parents, stood the man from the mirror, the one with the too wide grin. He stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. It crashed to the floor, and finally, there was sound, but not from the lamp. From upstairs, footsteps. He stared at the ceiling. The steps were slow, steady, like someone pacing a room deliberately. They didn't stop, didn't hurry. Just back and forth, over and over. He grabbed the nearest object, a metal flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and edged toward the staircase. He hadn't moved this slowly in his life. Every step up creaked, loud and awful. With each rise, the footsteps above him grew clearer, until, finally, they stopped. The hallway stretched before him like a tunnel, dimly lit by the hallway bulb. All the doors were closed. He knew which one had the footsteps behind it, the guest room. No one had used it in months, maybe longer. He reached for the doorknob. Cold. Ice cold. Before he could turn it, something tapped the door. Once. Twice. Then silence. He held his breath, then a voice muffled through the wood. Not whispering this time. Just speaking. Calm. You left us. You don't get to pretend anymore. He flinched. His instinct screamed to run, to leave the house entirely, burn it down, salt the earth. But instead, his hand twisted the knob and pushed the door open. Nothing. The room was empty. But it wasn't the room he remembered. The guest room used to be small and boxy, with a twin bed, some shelves, and a dusty bookshelf. Now it was massive. Cathedral ceilings, wooden beams, candle sconces burning with flame that didn't flicker. And in the middle of it, a long dining table, set for 6. Nathan's legs moved without permission. He stepped inside, and the door shut behind him with a heavy, final thud. At the head of the table sat a girl, maybe 15. Her face pale, hands folded neatly in her lap. Her eyes met his. She didn't blink. You said you wouldn't forget, she said. Nathan's voice barely escaped his throat. I don't know you. She tilted her head. You don't remember any of it. He shook his head slowly. You said we'd be safe, she continued. You said you'd come back. The floor shifted beneath him subtly, like the house was breathing again. The girl stood. Her body didn't move right. Too smooth, too quiet. We waited. The others, they're still here. Nathan took a step back. Others. She nodded. Then the lights died, and the room wasn't empty anymore. Figures surrounded the table, all at once. Some seated, some standing, all looking at him. Their faces were warped, stretched and blurred like melting wax. He recognized none of them. But deep down he felt them. One by one, they started whispering. You left. We trusted you. You promised. You let them take us. Nathan backed toward the door, but it was gone. Again. The wall was smooth where it had been. The girl stepped closer. You made the house. You fed it. You brought us. Nathan's stomach dropped. That's not true. But she was already lifting something from the table. A photograph. She handed it to him, and his fingers trembled as he looked down. It was him, standing at the edge of the woods, hand outstretched. Behind him, a group of children, younger than him. All of them staring at the house in the background. All of them smiling. He dropped the photo like it burned. No, he whispered. I never. You don't remember, she said, voice flat. But the house does. Suddenly, the candlelight surged, bright and blinding. The figures screamed in unison, a sound that cracked the air like a lightning bolt. The room shook, plates shattered. Chairs flew. Nathan threw his arms up, shielding his face. When the light dimmed again, the room was empty. Only he remained, and on the table, a single object now rested, a key. The same one the figure had held before. He picked it up, knowing he shouldn't, but unable to stop. It was warm. The second his fingers closed around it, a door appeared in the wall ahead. Wooden, with carvings all over it. Symbols he didn't recognize but felt ancient and wrong. He opened the door and stepped through, and found himself in a basement. Not his basement. No, this was older stone walls. Dirt floor, dozens of candles burning without smoke. Chains hung from the ceiling. And against the far wall, a mirror, the same mirror from the house. It showed his reflection, but now it was smiling. His real face didn't move. The reflection lifted its hand and pressed it against the glass. Nathan couldn't move. It was like gravity shifted toward that mirror. The reflection mouthed something, not words. A name. Ashcroft. Then, without warning, the reflection slammed its face against the glass, over and over. Blood smeared the surface, but the reflection kept grinning. Nathan turned to run, and found he wasn't alone in the basement anymore. The girl was there, the other figures too, standing in the shadows, watching, waiting. And on the wall behind them, carved deep into the stone in jagged letters WENE ver lefty. His knees buckled. He hit the ground hard. The key fell from his hand. He didn't remember how he got out. Just that when he woke, he was back in his room, lying on the floor, the morning sun bleeding through the curtains. His phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. Part 2 begins tonight. His blood ran cold. There was no sender, just a photo attachment. He opened it. It was the photo again. The children at the edge of the woods. But this time, their faces were gone, blank ovals. Except for his. He was still smiling. Nathan didn't sleep after the message. He couldn't. Even when he tried to close his eyes, the image of that photo burned behind his eyelids. His face smiling back at him, while the others were faceless. Erased like they were never real. Morning light did nothing to ease the cold sweat clinging to his skin. The world outside his window looked normal. Too normal. The kind of calm that felt unnatural, like it was trying too hard. There were no birds. No dogs barking. No cars rolling down the street. And yet, everything looked the same. Mailbox standing straight. The neighbor's wind chime swaying lazily in still air. But when Nathan stepped out onto his porch, it hit him there was no wind. The leaves didn't move. The trees didn't rustle. Even his own breath seemed to hang longer in the air than it should have, like time was beginning to bend around him. He went back inside, pacing like a trapped animal, trying to piece together what was happening. The house felt hollow now, not haunted, emptied, like it had been cleaned out by something that didn't want to leave a trace. His phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. This time no text, just a video. Nathan hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Every part of him screamed not to press play. But curiosity is cruel. He tapped it. The video began in total darkness. Then the sound of footsteps, soft, squelching, like someone walking barefoot across wet ground. The image slowly faded in a wooded path. The camera moved like it was strapped to someone's chest, swaying side to side with each step. The path was narrow, the trees gnarled and too tall. They leaned over, their branches forming a kind of cage, keeping the figure on the trail. Then voices, children laughing, dozens of them. But the laughter wasn't playful. It was jagged, broken, like it was being mimicked by something that didn't understand how humans sounded. The laughter rose and fell in waves, echoing off the trees in impossible directions. The camera kept moving, deeper into the woods, until it stopped at a clearing. In the center stood Ashcroft Manor, but it wasn't ruined, not like Nathan had seen it. It was pristine, bright white walls, tall glass windows, the red door gleaming in the moonlight, and in front of the house, standing in two lines, were children, maybe 20 of them, all holding hands, all staring directly into the camera. The video cut to black. Nathan nearly dropped the phone. His stomach turned. His legs felt like they'd stop working any second. He backed into the wall, gripping it like it might keep him anchored. His thoughts spun out of control. How long had this been going on? Were those children still there? Were they even real? He scrolled back through the messages looking for anything, any clue. But all the texts, all the images, had vanished. The phone was clean, as if nothing had ever been sent. Then came the knock. 3 soft raps at the front door. He froze. His body went cold. No one knocked like that. Not in the middle of the day. Not without ringing the doorbell first. He moved slowly, carefully toward the peephole. But the front porch was empty. No delivery truck, no neighbor, just silence. Then another knock, this time from the back door. Nathan spun around, heart pounding. That door was locked. He knew it was. But still, he crept toward it, gripping the flashlight from the night before like a weapon. Outside the back door was a small deck, and beyond it woods. He peered through the blinds. A child stood at the edge of the trees, too far to make out clearly, but close enough to see its pale face. It was holding something in its hands. A stuffed rabbit, gray, one ear missing, dirt caked around its seams. The child raised a hand and waved, then turned and walked into the trees. Nathan knew he should stay inside, lock everything, hide. But his feet were already moving. Some pulled deeper than fear tugged at his chest. By the time he reached the edge of the woods, the child was gone. Only the stuffed rabbit remained, sitting on a stump like it had been left there for him. He picked it up. The fabric was damp, rotten. Inside the ear, stitched in fading thread, were 3 letters NH, his initials. He staggered back, nearly tripping over a root. He didn't remember the toy. Didn't remember ever owning a rabbit like this. But some part of him recognized it. A memory buried so deep it had decayed. His phone buzzed again. Another video. This one showed a playground, old, rusted. The swing set creaked in the wind. The merry-go-round turned slowly on its own. The camera panned across the playground, then zoomed in on a slide. Someone had carved words into the plastic. Nathan had to pause the video to read it clearly. WERAMEMBRBSDOUDID. He hit stop. The air around him seemed to grow thicker. The trees pressed in closer. He turned to head back to the house. But the woods weren't the same. The path was gone. In its place was a wall of trees, impenetrable. Panic took over. He ran. Branches tore at his clothes. Thorns raked his arms. He sprinted through the underbrush, not knowing where he was going. Only that he had to get out. That's when he found the cabin. Small. Broken. Almost camouflaged by vines and thyme. It wasn't the manor. This was something older. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Old paper, rotting wood, and something metallic beneath it. The cabin had one room. A bed, collapsed. A fireplace, choked with ash. And on the wall, hundreds of photographs. All of him, different ages, different times. Some as a child, some as a teen. Some from angles that made no sense. Sleeping, eating, walking home from school. All of them taken without his knowledge. Pinned between the photos was a journal. He opened it. The handwriting was his. But the entries were impossible. They're gone. I led them in and I didn't close the door. I didn't mean to. She told me it would forget if I did. The house won't let them go. It feeds now. I remember their names but not their faces. I think that's worse. Nathan's hands trembled as he turned the pages. Near the end, one final sentence, underlined in thick black ink. When the house calls, you have to answer. A sound snapped behind him. He spun, flashlight raised. The girl from the dining room stood in the doorway. Her eyes hollow, skin pale like porcelain. You brought them, she said softly. Nathan shook his head. I don't remember. I didn't mean to. But you did, she replied. And they remember. The ground beneath the cabin groaned. The walls cracked. Dust fell like snow. Then the trees screamed. A high, shrill sound like metal tearing through flesh. The girl pointed behind him. There's one more room. Nathan turned. The fireplace had vanished. In its place stood a black door. No knob. Just a keyhole. In his hand. Without realizing how it got there, he was holding the key again. His thumb brushed over the cold metal. The girl nodded. You have to finish what you started. Nathan didn't know what waited on the other side. But the air around him gave no choice. He stepped forward, slid the key in, and turned. The key clicked into place with a sound that didn't belong in a wooden cabin. It echoed like it had turned inside a cathedral, a deep metallic groan that vibrated through Nathan's bones. The black door didn't swing open. It folded away, disappearing inward like smoke being sucked into a vent. Behind it was nothing. No room, no floor, no walls. Just blackness so thick, so deep, it seemed to swallow what little light clung to Nathan's flashlight. He stepped forward, expecting to fall, but the ground caught him. Smooth, hard, cold like marble, though it looked like ink. He walked cautiously, every footstep muted, absorbed by the endless dark. His breath felt loud here, intrusive. He couldn't see the ceiling or the horizon, just the line of his flashlight's beam struggling against the void. Then, a sound, soft and familiar, a child crying. Nathan spun toward the noise. It came from nowhere and everywhere. A little girl's sobs, stuttering between gasps like she'd been crying for hours. He followed it blindly, hands out in front, walking faster now. Every instinct told him to turn around, to go back through the door. But the door was gone. It had sealed behind him the moment he stepped inside. The crying grew louder, and something else joined it. Not footsteps, scraping, like fingernails dragging across glass. He stopped moving. The light shook in his hand. He wasn't alone in the dark. Then came the whisper, "You let them die." Nathan's breath caught in his throat. "Who are you?" he called, but the darkness ate his voice. The crying stopped. Silence returned, thicker than before, until he heard it again, a whisper, inches from his ear. "You led them in. You left them." He spun around. No one, just that thick, churning blackness. But the air was warmer now. He could feel breath that wasn't his moving across his skin. "I didn't know," he said, backing up. "I don't remember." A shape appeared in the dark. Not clear, not whole, just the outline of something tall, hunched wrong. Its limbs moved like broken sticks tied together. Nathan backed away, light fixed on it. But it didn't retreat. It walked forward, its face hidden in the dark, except for two white slivers where eyes should be. Not eyes, though. Smiles. Grins stretched so wide they bent around its head. Dozens of them. "You fed us," it said. The voice was a choir of whispers. "You gave us names. And now you want to forget." Nathan turned and ran. The dark shifted beneath his feet like it was alive. He ran until his legs burned, until he thought his lungs would tear. But there was no end, no walls, just more black, more cold. Then ahead a light, faint, flickering. He sprinted toward it. The light revealed a door, normal, wooden, just like his own front door back home. But written on it in chalk were words he almost didn't want to read. His brain resisted them. But his eyes moved anyway. "What you buried is waiting." He opened it and stepped into a classroom. Not just any classroom, his old fifth grade room. Posters on the walls. Alphabet strips above the whiteboard. Desks small enough to make him feel like a giant. Everything looked untouched, preserved in time. And yet, dust covered the floor in thick layers, disturbed only by footprints. Small ones. Children's. At the front of the room, a teacher's desk. A nameplate, Miss Dorian. He remembered her. Strict. Kind. A little sad, like she carried something heavy. The chalkboard behind the desk held a message in childlike scrawl. "We waited after class, like you said." Nathan's skin crawled. He walked through the aisles slowly, seeing names carved into desks. Some he recognized. Some made his stomach turn. Then, a noise behind him. A desk scraping against the floor. He spun around. A child sat in the back row. Her face was obscured by long black hair. Her shoulders moved like she was crying. He stepped closer, heart pounding. "Hey, are you okay?" She didn't respond, just kept sobbing. But her voice was wrong, too low, too deep, like an adult trying to mimic a child's pain. He reached out to touch her shoulder. She stopped moving, then lifted her head. Her face was his, but younger, his 12-year-old face staring back at him, eyes filled with terror. He opened his mouth to scream, but the boy beat him to it. "You said you'd come back!" the younger version shrieked. "You left us in the walls!" The lights in the classroom exploded one after another. The windows shattered. Wind howled through the room. Nathan fell back, covering his face. The scream became layered, echoed by dozens of others. Children, all angry, all betrayed. When the storm of voices calmed, Nathan sat up. The classroom was empty again, except for one thing. In the center of the room, a trapdoor. He didn't remember it being there. But it was open, waiting. He crawled toward it, legs numb, breathing ragged. Inside, a ladder descended into more black. He climbed down, rung after rung, into a tunnel that smelled like old earth and iron. His flashlight flickered, sputtering as though the batteries were dying. But it wasn't the battery. It was the tunnel. It didn't want to be seen. He reached the bottom. The tunnel stretched forward, lined with old, wooden doors on either side, each one labeled with a name. He recognized every single one. The names of the children from the photo, from the video, from his childhood. Some hadn't been in school long. Some had only attended for a week or two before vanishing. Nathan hadn't thought of them in years. He didn't want to, because he'd known something was wrong back then. He'd felt it. Felt the pull of the house even then. One door creaked open on its own. Inside, a small bedroom, a child's room, but everything was made of shadows, the toys, the furniture, the bed, all shifting shapes. And on the bed sat the girl, the same one from the manor, the woods, the cabin. Her eyes met his, tired, hollow. "You were supposed to keep us safe," she said. Nathan stepped into the room. "I didn't know. I was a kid, like you. You knew the house was hungry," she whispered. "You heard it. We all did. But you brought them anyway." And now she held something out to him, a mirror shard. He took it, hand shaking. In the shard, he didn't see his face. He saw the manor, burning, children screaming inside, and his own voice, laughing. But it wasn't joy. It was relief. Then the shard shattered in his hand, cutting deep into his palm. Blood dripped onto the floor. The girl looked down at it, nodded. "That's the door," she said. "You have to give it your blood now." Nathan collapsed to his knees. The pain was nothing compared to the terror curling inside him. "What are you talking about?" "The house doesn't just keep the ones you gave it," she whispered. "It keeps the part of you that made the deal." He stared at her. "What deal?" Her mouth curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You'll remember soon." And then the walls fell away. The room was gone. And he stood again in front of the manor. Just like in the photo, the children at his side, only this time they weren't smiling. And neither was he. He looked down. His hand was no longer bleeding. It was vanishing, turning to ash, piece by piece. Behind him, the house groaned. It had opened its mouth, and it wanted more. The house was breathing. Nathan could feel it in his bones, an inhale that tugged at the air around him, sucking in every sound, every ounce of warmth, every thought not tethered down. The manor's front door stood wide open now, not a door at all but a mouth, gaping and hungry, with wood warped like gums and rusted hinges stretched like jaws. He should have run. He should have screamed. But he stood frozen on the lawn as the children flanked him, silent, watching, their eyes hollow like holes burnt into paper. The air shimmered. Time buckled. It wasn't night, but it wasn't day either. The sun hung in the sky, unmoving, pale and wrong, like it had been painted there and forgotten. The trees stood motionless behind him, their branches twitching without wind. He looked to the children, trying to speak, trying to remember who they were, why they were here with him. But he only knew one thing for sure. He had brought them, and the house had kept them. One of the children moved, a boy with skin the color of ash, eyes too big for his face. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in newspaper, then offered it to Nathan with hands that trembled as if they remembered too much. Nathan took it. The paper was damp. When he unwrapped it, he almost dropped it immediately. It was a tooth. Long, yellow, sharp at one end, not human. The boy said nothing, but the look in his eyes said everything. The house had fed once. It was ready to eat again. The tooth pulsed in Nathan's palm. He could feel it beating like a second heart, matching his rhythm. And when he looked at it long enough, he saw something move in the root. A twitch, a curl, like something alive had burrowed inside. He closed his fingers around it, feeling its edge cut into his skin. The red door beckoned. He stepped forward. With each step, the ground changed beneath his feet. Grass became wood. Wood became rot. Then flesh. Yes, soft, damp. Giving under his shoes like stepping across muscle. The porch boards pulsed. When he reached the door, it breathed out, a warm gust that smelled like dust and blood. He crossed the threshold, and the house closed behind him. This time, the silence wasn't empty, it was full. Crammed with whispers so soft they didn't need ears to be heard. They crawled along his spine, coiled around his thoughts. Names, sentences, pleas, threats. All voices he didn't recognize, yet all of them knew his name, Nathan. He brought us. He gave us our rooms. The foyer looked the same, decayed, towering, with that damned mirror above the fireplace. Only now, the mirror wasn't a reflection. It was a window, and on the other side, Nathan could see a version of himself. Clean, smiling, safe. Sitting in a bright kitchen, eating cereal while the TV played cartoons in the background. He reached out to touch it, but his hand met something soft. Not glass, skin. The mirror rippled, and the Nathan on the other side looked up, met his gaze, then smiled wider. Behind the reflection, shadows moved. The fake Nathan didn't react, didn't see them. But the real Nathan did. They slithered toward the table, reaching long fingers toward the boy's neck. Nathan screamed, slammed his fists against the mirror. But he wasn't in the room anymore. He stood in a hallway that bent where it should have been straight. Doors lined both sides. Dozens of them, each made of different material. One looked like old stone. One was stitched together from fur and hide. One seemed made of thousands of fingernails, and each door whispered a different voice. "Help me. Come in. It's your turn. You left me here. I'm still waiting." He walked past them, trying not to look too long at any one door. Some pulsed. Some blood. One of them breathed. At the end of the hall was a staircase that went down forever. The air grew hotter with every step. The walls wept moisture. The banister warped and curled like it wanted to wrap around his hand and hold him tight. The basement wasn't a basement anymore. It was a cathedral of rot, tall ceilings dripping with mold, pillars made of bones. The floor was black water, ankle-deep, still and freezing. Floating on its surface were toys, broken, bloated, forgotten. Dolls with cracked porcelain faces. Action figures with missing limbs. A child's blanket, stained dark. Nathan stepped in. The water pulled at him, with each movement. The ripples whispered to him in voices of those he couldn't remember, but had never truly forgotten. Children he used to play with. Kids who vanished and were spoken about in hushed tones by adults. He thought they'd moved away. He was wrong. In the center of the flooded chamber stood the girl again. Same black dress, same emotionless stare. "You brought them here," she said. Nathan nodded. There was no use denying it anymore. "I don't remember why," he whispered. "You will," she said, then held out her hand. In it, a locket, silver, rusted at the hinge. When he took it and opened it, a tune played. A soft lullaby that made his legs go weak. A song his mother used to hum when he was sick. But the photo inside wasn't of her. It was of him. Younger, smiling, covered in dirt. And behind him in the photo, barely visible, was the house. "You found it first," the girl said. "You led us here." Nathan's knees buckled. The truth crawled through his mind like a parasite waking up. They'd been playing in the woods. A group of them. Hide and seek. He remembered the others now. Lucy, Marlon, Tam, little Kenny, who always cried when it got too dark. They had found the house by accident. Only, he was the one who dared them to go inside. He was the one who told them it'd be fun. He remembered the dare. He remembered the laughter. He remembered closing the door behind them. He had locked it. Something in the water moved. A low shape rose, tall and thin, stretching like wet paper. It had no eyes. Its mouth was stitched shut. It carried a key around its neck. The girl backed away. "You need to talk to it." Nathan didn't move. Couldn't. The shape drifted toward him. The closer it came, the more his lungs refused to fill. He choked, knees sinking into the water. The thing stopped inches from his face. It didn't speak. but he heard it, not with his ears, with his memory. "You left them for me," it said, "and in return, I left you your name." Nathan clutched his head. His skull burned. "You're the mouth," he gasped. "No, I am the house. The mouth is yours." Then it leaned close and tore the stitches from its own lips. What spilled from its mouth was light, and sound, and screams, and truth. Nathan fell backward, his mind unraveling. His hands shook. Blood poured from his ears. In one moment of terrible clarity, he remembered everything. The deals, the games, the promises. He had led children to the house again and again. Not always knowingly. Sometimes through dreams, sometimes through stories. He had become the bait, the door, the invitation. He was never a victim. He was the key. The children never left. Not fully. The house wore them, fed on their laughter, trapped their last moments in its walls like insects in amber. He stood now in the stomach of the house, and he could feel the next hunger coming. "You have to feed it," the girl said, "or it feeds on you." Nathan looked at her. "I can't." "You always do," she whispered. "This is part 5. You always feed it in part 5. And just like that, his phone buzzed in his pocket. New message. "You have until midnight. Pick one." Nathan looked up. The girl was gone. So were the toys. So was the water. He stood alone, back in his bedroom. And in his contacts list, one new entry had appeared. A name he hadn't seen in years. Kenny H., still alive. Still reachable. The house was hungry again. And it was waiting for him to choose. There's a moment, right after you open your eyes, when the world feels uncertain, like waking up might have taken you somewhere else entirely. That was the first thing Nathan noticed when he came to. Sprawled across the floor of his bedroom, the smell of rot still faint in the air, as though the house hadn't let go of him fully. The phone was still in his hand, the message still on the screen. "You have until midnight. Pick one." He didn't move for several minutes. The room felt wrong. Not haunted, not possessed, staged. Like someone had tried too hard to make it look like nothing had happened. His lamp was upright, though he remembered knocking it over. His comforter was folded at the foot of the bed, even though he never made his bed. And the window was shut, even though he always left it cracked. It wasn't just his room anymore. It was a set, and he was being watched. Nathan stared at the name on the screen. Kenny H. The name clung to his mind like wet cloth, heavy and soaked in old guilt. The last time he saw Kenny was in 5th grade. Small kid, pale as chalk, always clutching a toy in one hand like it was armor. He had vanished after a game of hide and seek behind the school, and everyone thought he'd just run away. But Nathan knew. He knew. Kenny had followed him into the woods, just like the others. Just like Lucy and Marlon and Tam. Just like they always did. The clock on the nightstand flicked its red digits forward. 11:02 p.m. 58 minutes left. Nathan didn't know what the consequence would be if he failed to choose, only that the house didn't bluff. And after everything he'd seen, after the hallway that bent, after the girl's empty stare, after the breathing walls, he understood one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't about fairness. It was about hunger. He stared at the phone. The contact was real. He could call Kenny, reach out, lure him in. Or he could refuse. But he knew the house. It didn't need him to deliver Kenny. Just pointing it in the right direction was enough. The moment Nathan thought of someone, really thought about them, remembered their smell, the sound of their voice, the way they used to laugh, it was like opening a door. And the house would walk through. He dropped the phone and backed into the wall. His heart thudded like war drums. "I can't," he whispered. "Not again." "I won't." The air rippled. The overhead light flickered once, then again. The mirror on his closet door fogged over from the inside. Something was breathing behind the glass. And then the writing began. One word, smeared in fog from the other side. Liar. The mirror cracked straight down the center. Nathan ran. He burst out of his room, down the stairs, and into the kitchen. The house was too quiet. Too clean. The kind of clean that smells like bleach and cover up. He opened the fridge, not knowing why, not expecting anything, but still he reeled back when he saw it. Inside, on the middle shelf, a red ribbon tied neatly around a single box. A shoebox. One he hadn't seen in years. He pulled it out with trembling fingers. The ribbon came off with barely a tug. The lid creaked open. Inside was Kenny's toy. A soft blue elephant with one missing eye and stuffing leaking from its side. Nathan had forgotten about it. He'd seen Kenny holding it that day in the woods, right before he vanished. Nathan had found it afterward, half buried in leaves near the house, and he'd told no one. He'd taken it home, buried it in a box, and shoved it deep into the garage. But now here it was, in the fridge, ice cold. He backed away slowly. The kitchen tiles began to sweat. Droplets formed and ran in long, slow streaks, leaving behind trails of grime like veins. The ceiling light buzzed louder, flickering into a strobe. Then, from behind him, a voice. Small, innocent. "Nathan, is that you?" He turned. And there was Kenny, standing barefoot on the tile floor, soaking wet, hair dripping, eyes wide. His clothes looked exactly like they had that day. Dirty jeans, red windbreaker, untied shoes. Nathan blinked, and Kenny was gone. But the floor was wet now. Muddy footprints leading into the living room. Nathan followed. The TV was on. Static hissed like waves crashing on a shore. The screen flickered, dancing with snow. Then, an image blinked in. Brief, almost subliminal. Children lined up at the manor's door, then gone. Another flash. Nathan's childhood bedroom. Another. His face. Smiling, but the eyes, those weren't his eyes. He yanked the plug from the wall. The screen died. Then the doorbell rang. He stood frozen, blood draining from his face. No one rang the bell. Not at night. Not anymore. He moved to the door, slow as death. Peeked through the peephole. Empty porch. Except for the elephant, sitting upright on the welcome mat. Only now it had two eyes again. And it was smiling. Nathan fell backward. The house groaned. The ceiling above him creaked, as if something heavy was moving across the floorboards. The phone in his pocket buzzed. 11:39 p.m. 21 minutes left. And then, the final message. Choose, or we choose for you. Below the text was a photo attachment. He opened it. It was a picture of his sister, lying in bed, sleeping peacefully. Unaware, Nathan screamed. Through the phone, it hit the wall, shattered into pieces. The house laughed, not out loud, in his head. Mocking, patient, starving. The rules had changed. It wasn't asking for Kenny anymore. It was asking for anyone. As long as Nathan gave a name, anyone he loved, anyone he remembered, all he had to do was think. He ran to the window. Tried to open it. Nailed shut. He smashed a chair through the glass. It bounced off like rubber. The house had sealed itself, and it was counting down. He collapsed in the hallway, gripping his hair, whispering apologies to no one. Then the whispers came back, thousands of them. You led us. You watched us die. Now feed us again, or we'll eat you. The lights all shut off. A red glow bled from under every door. The walls pulsed. The air turned thick, sulfur and iron and heat. The floor opened. A mouth wide and grinning, lined with teeth made from splinters and bone. It breathed hot and fast, and from inside it came a sound. Sobbing. From his voice. Begging. It was him. His own voice. A version of him trapped in the house's stomach. Screaming, crying, shouting names. One after another. Anyone. Everyone. Nathan curled into a ball. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't pick someone else. Not again. But as the mouth yawned wider, the walls shook harder. And upstairs, his sister's bedroom door creaked open on its own. Midnight was no longer something that approached. It arrived all at once, like a blade sliding between ribs. 1 second the digital clock on the microwave read 11:59, its glow a harsh red sliver in the kitchen stillness. And the next, all the numbers vanished. No 1200, no blinking, just darkness. The house exhaled. The sound came from the walls themselves. A groaning breath that filled the hallway made the windows pulse inward like lungs being crushed. Nathan didn't move. He sat at the base of the stairs, knees to his chest, heart hammering so loudly it was the only sound he could hear over the rising silence. The decision had passed him. He hadn't chosen. Not Kenny, not his sister. No one. For the first time in the story, he'd stood still. And the house was furious. The walls cracked like they were stretching, the beams moaning, the floorboards warping beneath him. From above, he heard the slow, deliberate creak of his sister's door swinging open. Not fast, not sudden, announced. Like something wanted him to hear it, wanted him to imagine what was waiting at the threshold of her room. He scrambled to his feet. No, 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 he muttered. You said choose, you didn't say. She wasn't part of this. She's not. But the house didn't care. It never had. It only knew hunger. And now it would choose. He ran up the stairs 2 at a time, his feet nearly slipping on the smooth, damp wood. The air was heavier up here, thick like syrup, clinging to his skin, each breath coated with the taste of mold and ash. As he reached the top, the hallway stretched. He'd crossed this distance 1,000 times. It had never taken more than 6 steps. Now it took 30, 40, each one slower than the last. Time had warped, or maybe time had surrendered. The air grew colder with each step. Freezing, sharp, like breathing in broken glass, and the light from the hallway fixture, just one flickering bulb above, shifted color. No longer yellow, not red, but something between them, like a bleeding bruise. His sister's door stood wide open. The room beyond was a cave, a void. He stepped through, and the world changed again. It wasn't her room. Not anymore. The bed was gone. The window gone. The rug she'd picked out herself, the bookshelf, the framed photo of their family, all gone. In their place was nothing, not emptiness, not space, nothing, just a mirror, tall, thin, touching the ceiling and floor. He stared into it and saw her, his sister, but not here. She was sitting at her desk, head resting on folded arms, breathing softly, peacefully, still in her room, her real room, the one the house had imitated but couldn't fully take. She hadn't been pulled through yet. Nathan reached toward the mirror, hand trembling. The glass shimmered at his touch, rippling like the surface of a lake. On the other side, she stirred. Her fingers twitched. Her breathing quickened. He pressed harder. The glass pushed back. Then it opened. A hand shot out, not hers, long, pale. Fingers like branches. Claws. It wrapped around his wrist and yanked. The house didn't want her. It wanted him. He screamed, tried to pull back, but another hand grabbed his ankle. Then another his shoulder. Cold fingers. Dozens of them, erupting from the mirror, dragging him into its slick, silver mouth. As he was pulled closer, his reflection shattered. Not the mirror. Him. His face split into fragments, each one showing a different version of himself. The boy who locked the door. The teen who forgot the missing kids. The man who ran away instead of remembering. They all stared back. And they all smiled. The glass swallowed him whole. Darkness. Again. But this was different. This was before. He opened his eyes and saw the woods. The ones behind the school. The place where it all started. He turned and saw the others. Lucy. Marlon. Tam. Kenny. And himself. A younger version. Standing by the trees. Smiling. Holding the red ribbon. Nathan screamed across time, trying to stop it. But no one heard. Not even the boy. Especially not the boy. Because he wasn't being shown the memory anymore. He was the memory. Time didn't move forward or back. It moved down. Like layers in a hole. And this one went deep. The children stepped toward the house, their giggles echoing strangely in the trees. The door yawned open. The boy turned, looked back once, and smiled. Nathan saw something in his eyes. It wasn't fear. It was relief. Because the house had promised him something back then. No more bullies. No more being the scared one. The smallest. The weakest. You give us them. It had whispered, and we'll give you a name. A name people would remember. A place in the story, and he had taken the deal. The forest trembled. Then the house erupted from the ground again. Flesh and wood and smoke. Nathan was yanked upward, ripped out of the memory like meat from a hook. He landed back in the mirror room with a gasp, blood in his mouth, his wrist bruised from the grip. But he was whole. The hands were gone. The mirror was solid, and the door to his sister's real room was still open. She sat at her desk, unharmed. Nathan ran to her, shook her shoulders. She opened her eyes. Confused. "Nate," she asked, "are you okay? What's wrong with your face?" He didn't understand. He reached for the mirror above her desk and stopped. His reflection was gone. There was nothing in the glass, not even the room, just him, standing in endless dark, staring back. Then, slowly, his reflection smiled. Behind it, the children reappeared. Lucy, Marlon, Kenny, all of them. Their mouths sewn shut, their eyes replaced with keys. And Nathan's own voice whispered in the glass, "You didn't choose. Now, we wear you instead." The reflection pressed its hand to the glass, and his sister's face began to change. Not physically, not visibly, but underneath. Her expression turned wrong, too calm, too still. She blinked too slowly. Her mouth didn't open when she spoke. "I'm glad you brought me back, Nathan," she said. "But you shouldn't have hesitated." The house had picked, and it hadn't needed him to choose anymore. The storm outside had no sound. Nathan could see the wind howling through the trees, leaves being torn from branches and flung into the air like ash. But there was no noise, just a deep, humming pressure behind his ears, as though sound itself had been drained from the world. Inside the room, his sister, not his sister, sat on the edge of the bed, still, smiling faintly, hands folded in her lap. The light above flickered every 7 seconds. Exactly 7. He counted. The same way he counted her blinks, her breathing, her smile never faltered. He wanted to run, but run where? The house had reached inside his real world now. It wasn't confined to its walls anymore. It had learned to stretch. It had grown. "I know what you're thinking," she said finally, voice flat, eyes locked onto him. "But I didn't come to hurt you. I came to finish what you started." Nathan backed against the door, his hand fumbling for the knob, but there wasn't one anymore. It had disappeared the moment he shut it. "I didn't start anything," he muttered. "I was a kid. I didn't understand." She tilted her head. "But you did understand. That's the worst part." The shadows in the room thickened around the corners. Nathan blinked and saw movement. Too quick, too thin to name. Crawling just beyond the light, hiding in the edges like dust that breathed. "You were the only one who heard the voice," she said. "The others followed you because they trusted you. You remember that, don't you?" He did. God help him, he did. It had started with a game. A simple, stupid game. They were 11. The sun had already started dipping. The woods smelled like pine and dirt, and the dare came like it always did. With a smirk, a nudge, a double dog. The house had appeared between the trees, old and crooked, leaning sideways like it was trying to listen. The others didn't want to go in, not even brave, loud Tam, but Nathan had insisted, because he had heard it, a voice, soft, scratchy, like someone whispering through cloth. "Bring them in. Just one. That's all it takes." And it had promised him something. Something no one else ever had. A way out of the silence he lived in at school. The loneliness, the laughter behind his back. All it asked for was one friend, one step, one name, and he gave it Kenny. He hadn't meant to give the rest. But the house doesn't forget kindness. It collects it. "You were the first to feed it," his sister said. "And that means you were the first to make a deal."
"I didn't make a deal,"
he snapped. "I didn't shake a hand or sign a paper. You walked them in and locked the door. That's a signature. That's a contract." The room pulsed, not visibly, but emotionally, like grief shaking the air. Nathan staggered. She stood up slowly, eyes never leaving his. "Do you want to see what the house gave you in return?" "No," he whispered. But the mirror on the wall shimmered. It rippled like water, and in its surface, Nathan saw 100 versions of himself, laughing in classrooms, winning awards, making friends. All lives that never truly happen. The house had built him a lie, a mask. It had eaten the kids he brought and fed him back a better life. It had rewritten him. Tears blurred his vision. That's not me. That's not who I am. But it was. The girl's voice deepened, not louder, but older, wiser. Like the house had decided to speak through her now, wear her face like a favorite jacket. And now the mask is cracking. Now the truth leaks in, and you remember what that truth costs. The window burst open, not shattered, peeled. The glass folded outward, and from beyond it came a rush of black mist, wreathing with shapes, crawling with limbs that didn't make sense. The room darkened until the only source of light was the mirror, glowing faintly like a dying eye. From inside it came a voice. Nathan's own, but younger. I just wanted someone to notice me. The figure stepped out of the mirror, small. 11 years old, dirty shoes, dirtier hands. His reflection from the day he made the deal. The two Nathans stared at each other, and the child smiled. You can end it, the boy said. All of it. Just take back your name. What does that mean? Give the house what's owed. The last piece, the one thing you've always held back. No, Nathan said. You want me to die? The boy shook his head. The house doesn't want your body. It wants your name. It wants the story of you. It wants to write you into its walls like the rest of them. One more room. One more locked door. Behind him, the sister nodded. It's not about dying, she said. It's about disappearing. Nathan looked down at his hands. Already, the edges were fading, not visibly. Not like smoke, but contextually. He couldn't remember the last book he read. The last meal he cooked. He couldn't even remember his own handwriting. His self was being chewed piece by piece. How do I stop it, he asked. How do I kill the house? She smiled. Not sweet, not cruel, just tired. You can't. The mirror pulsed. The boy Nathan stepped backward into it, leaving behind only a whisper, you have to outlive it. Nathan woke up in a motel bathtub. Not metaphorically, not a dream. Cold water, full clothes, his mouth tasted like copper. The mirror was fogged, but this time from real steam. He climbed out, drenched, shivering. The room was unfamiliar. Cheap wallpaper, flickering lamp, TV buzzing with snow. On the bed sat a box. Shoebox sized. Red ribbon. No note. He didn't open it? Not yet. The motel phone rang. He picked it up with shaking fingers. No one on the other end. Then, a child's whisper. Kenny's alive. Click. Nathan dropped the phone, sat on the floor, held his face in his hands. It wasn't over. The house had let him go. But only because it wanted him to run, to carry the story somewhere new. The hunger was spreading. And now, he wasn't just the key. He was the door. There are certain names that live in the throat long after memory fades. Kenny was one of them. Even when Nathan had buried the memories, convinced himself the missing kids were just a string of coincidences, Kenny's name still lingered just beneath his breath, as if speaking it aloud might bring something crawling back through the cracks. And now, after everything, after the mirror, the mouth, the sister, the deal, Kenny's name had clawed its way back to him, not as guilt, but as proof. He was alive, somewhere. But if Kenny had survived the house, then what kind of life was he living now? Nathan sat in the dim motel room, soaked to the bone, clothes clinging like wet paper, his body stiff from the cold bath he'd woken in. The air smelled like mildew and something faintly chemical, as though the room had tried to cleanse itself after housing whatever had happened here before. The red ribbon box sat on the bed, untouched, pulsing with a quiet energy that made the skin on Nathan's arms tighten. He didn't need to open it to know it was watching him. He left it there and reached for his phone. The screen was cracked from when he threw it earlier, but it still worked. There was only one number in his mind, and it wasn't saved in his contacts. He had never written it down, never needed to. Because that was part of the house's curse. It gave you memories that felt old but were fresh. Made you feel like you'd known them all along. He typed the digits slowly. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice. Hoarse, quiet like a match just struck. Hello. Nathan froze. Kenny. Silence. A long, breathless pause. Then you shouldn't be calling me. Nathan sat on the edge of the bed. His knees nearly buckled from the sudden pull of the past. It's me, he said. Nathan. Another pause. This time longer. Then something worse. Laughter. Not full. Not amused. Just a broken one-note chuckle, followed by a sigh like glass cracking under weight. Oh, it found you again, Kenny whispered. I was hoping it forgot. Nathan felt his throat tighten. Kenny, where are you? I don't live anywhere, he said. Not really. I stay ahead of it. That's all. Sleep during the day. Move every week. Sometimes it loses track when I don't dream. Kenny, I saw. Nathan's voice shook. I saw you. That day. You followed me. I remember it now. I locked the door. He couldn't finish. Kenny did it for him. You were just a kid. So was I. But the house doesn't care about age. It just needs a name. You gave it mine. Nathan clenched his jaw. But you're still here. No, Kenny said. I'm what's left. The room dimmed. Not the lights, the world. The color drained subtly from the walls. The shadows grew longer without shifting. Nathan felt it. The house had caught his scent again. Talking to Kenny had stirred the trail. How long have you been running? He asked. Since I escaped, since I cheated it. Nathan swallowed. How? Kenny exhaled, and in that breath, Nathan heard so much more than words. He heard time. Pain. Regret turned dry and silent. I gave it part of myself, Kenny said. Not my name. Not my soul. Something smaller. Something easier to miss. Nathan's voice dropped. What? Kenny didn't answer right away. Then he said, my reflection. And Nathan understood instantly. Kenny hadn't looked in a mirror in years. Because if he did, if he saw himself, it would pull him back. The house would reach through that polished surface like it had done so many times before and drag him into its stomach. They keep offering it back to me, Kenny said. Little pieces, in dreams, in puddles, in the way people's eyes shift when I pass. I can feel it hunting. But it's not just watching anymore, Nathan. It's growing again. Because you remembered. You pulled it into the world again. Nathan's hand moved unconsciously toward the red box. It's following me. It always was, Kenny said. But now it's not hiding. A thud echoed through the motel. Nathan stood up fast. The sound had come from the bathroom. He hadn't closed the mirror cabinet above the sink. He crept toward the door. Kenny, he whispered. It's here. The line stayed silent for a moment. Then Kenny's voice came sharp, panicked, stripped of its tired calm. Don't look in the mirror, Nathan. He turned the corner. The mirror was open, but it didn't reflect him. It showed a hallway. Dim, stretched, dozens of doors. The house. Don't look, Kenny begged through the phone. That's how it tags you again. Nathan backed away, heart hammering. But the mirror changed. It didn't show the house anymore. It showed Kenny. Now, alive, but barely, hollow eyes. Gaunt face, standing in a gas station bathroom, palms pressed against the walls, breathing like each exhale hurt, and behind him, a no. Nathan dropped the phone. In the mirror the figure stepped out, not from Kenny's world, from his. From behind him, long limbs, a grin too wide, black buttons for eyes, the thing that always stood near the back of the hallway in Ashcroft Manor, the one that never spoke. Nathan couldn't scream. The figure touched his shoulder. Its skin was dry like paper soaked in dust, and then it whispered. You opened the box. Nathan turned toward the bed. The box was open. He hadn't touched it, but it was open anyway. Inside, his name was carved on a wooden plaque, deep and rough. And beneath it, the toy elephant Kenny once carried, now burned at the edges, its single-button eye cracked in half. The figure stepped past him and picked up the elephant, cradled it, sighed, then turned. You don't need to run anymore, it said. I'm already inside you. Nathan collapsed. Not fainting, not falling, collapsing. His skin cracked like drying mud. His thoughts bled out. Not physically, spiritually. Memories began to peel away. His first kiss, his high school graduation. The sound of his father's laugh, all unraveling like they'd never mattered. He screamed. The figure smiled and faded. The mirror went black. The red box folded into itself and vanished. The motel lights flickered, and the room reset, perfect, untouched. No signs of Nathan, no signs of anyone, except a reflection in the mirror of a boy, 11 years old, dirty hands, smiling. The desert didn't care if you screamed. The wind could pull your voice apart before it left your throat, scatter it across the rocks, bury it under sand that forgot every footprint. Kenny had learned that a long time ago, back when he first clawed his way out of the house and into the vast nothingness of Nevada, a place where the stars watched but never blinked, a place that seemed empty enough to make the house lose interest, or at least pretend to. But tonight, the silence wasn't right. He sat cross-legged in a broken down motel on the edge of a forgotten highway, the only building for miles. The walls peeled in long strips, like they were tired of holding themselves together. The air conditioner was dead. The lights flickered occasionally, but never all at once. They pulsed in patterns, 3 quick flashes, then 2. Kenny had started counting them a few weeks back. Now he knew better. They weren't random. Nothing around him ever was. The house had found a way to send messages without paper or breath. You just had to notice. Tonight, it was saying he saw you. Nathan. The name tasted like smoke in Kenny's mouth. He hadn't spoken it aloud in years. Had buried it so deep that it only surfaced in dreams that left him breathless, covered in sweat, clawing at walls that were no longer there. But when the phone rang and he heard that voice, shaken, older, but still him, he felt the thread snap. The connection had been reestablished, and the house was already pulling. He sat on the bed now, not moving, watching the mirror across from him with the intensity of a man staring at his own execution. He hadn't looked into a mirror in almost a decade. Not really, he knew better. He'd taped over the reflective surfaces, broken the bathroom glass, learned to shave by feel. Because the house didn't need him to return. It only needed a sliver, a reflection, a memory, a piece. And a mirror was always watching. He hadn't meant to be seen. He'd slipped. Just once, a gas station in the middle of nowhere. A flicker of his own eyes catching in the restroom mirror. That's all it took. Now it was back. He could feel it in his teeth. An ache that pulsed with every lie he told himself. He had thought he was safe. Thought that time had thinned the house's reach. But the house wasn't made of wood and stone. It was made of story. And stories, they don't die. They wait. He pulled open the drawer beside the bed and took out the rusted tin he kept buried beneath his clothes. Inside was a single object, a key, black as tar, with veins running through it like living tissue. It was warm in his hand. This was how he had escaped. Years ago, when the others vanished into the walls, when the games turned into screams, when the windows stopped leading anywhere at all, Kenny had found a way out. Not through luck, not through strength, but through bargain. The house had spoken to him. Not in language, not even in voice. It had offered him a room, just one. A small place, quiet and dark, where the walls didn't move and the mirror didn't breathe. A corner of its mind, a silence in the noise. In return, he would never leave fully, never step back into the world unchanged. He agreed, and the house had given him a key. It let him go, but only because it knew he'd never be whole again. He walked with the house inside him. It whispered sometimes, in his sleep, in the hum of electrical lines, in the lull between heartbeats. It wasn't always words. Sometimes it was visions, of Nathan's smile, of Tam's scream, of Lucy's hand reaching through the wallpaper before it was pulled back forever. He thought he'd made peace with it. Until now, until Nathan called, until the name dragged the house out of memory and back into the world. Kenny stood slowly. The key in his hand twitched, not like metal, like flesh. He stared at the mirror, It pulsed once, then again. A heartbeat, and on the third pulse it opened, not cracked, not shattered, opened, like a door. He saw a hallway beyond, wooden, faded, the wallpaper peeling like burnt skin, and at the end a light, dim, flickering. The manor, Ashcroft, it hadn't changed, not in a single breath of time, and in that hallway, standing perfectly still, was a child. Nathan, but not the man he was now. The boy he'd been, dirty knees, tired eyes, standing in the same place he had all those years ago, smiling. Kenny should have turned away, should have closed the mirror and thrown the key into the desert. But he didn't, because part of him missed it. The house was a wound, yes, but it was also a purpose. It remembered him, and nothing else in the world had, not really. He stepped forward, into the mirror. The hallway smelled like wet soil and regret. His shoes stuck slightly to the floor as he walked, like the house was trying to decide whether it wanted to let him pass. The walls whispered his name, sometimes kindly, sometimes like a threat. Kenny, they said. Kenny, Kenny, Kenny. He reached the end of the hall. There was no door, just a hole, carved into the wall like a mouth torn into skin. He climbed through, and dropped into the room he feared most, the children's room, still preserved, still filled with toys and names and laughter that looped like a broken record. And in the center of it, him, the version the house had kept, a Kenny that never left. He was smaller, paler, his eyes were wide and glassy, and his mouth moved silently, lips repeating something again and again. Kenny stepped closer. He crouched, and he listened. Don't look in the mirror. Don't look in the mirror. Don't look in the mirror, over and over. A prayer, a mantra, a curse. The boy didn't blink, didn't breathe. He was a warning, and Kenny had ignored it. He turned, and there she was, the girl, the one Nathan saw again and again, the girl who never blinked. She smiled at him. You came back, she said. I had to. No, you chose to. Kenny swallowed. Where is Nathan? She tilted her head. He's with the house now. Inside. Like the rest of us. I want to speak to him. She shrugged. Then pointed at the boy in the center. That's him. Kenny blinked. No. That's me. Her smile widened. No, Kenny. That's what you left behind. And he's been waiting a long, long time. The mirror behind them shattered. The house screamed. Not loud. Not sharp. It was sad. Like a mother losing a child. Like a story being forgotten. And in that scream, Kenny heard everything Nathan had taken his place. The deal had shifted. The house had rebalanced its debt, and now Kenny was free. But freedom was never clean. He walked back through the hole, through the hallway, through the mirror, back into the motel. The room was quiet, empty. The mirror was blank, and in the drawer next to the bed, the key had turned to ash. Kenny sat down, put his head in his hands, and wept, because Nathan had paid the cost. And the house had learned a new rule. Names change. But stories can live forever. Nathan woke without a body. There was no heartbeat, no breath, no weight pulling him down. Just awareness, sharp and suspended in darkness so complete it felt sculpted. Not sleep, not death, something between. His thoughts didn't echo. They crawled, slow, uneven, as if even his memories had to fight to move. And then came the voice, not spoken, felt. A low vibration against the edges of what used to be him. You were always going to come back. He tried to speak, but there was no mouth. Tried to move, but there were no limbs. His entire presence had been reshaped into something formless, floating in a space that pulsed like a dying star. Images began to flicker around him, not visions, but rooms. A hallway he remembered from childhood, stretching into impossible dimensions. A staircase that looped endlessly into itself. A mirror. The mirror, cracked and breathing. Each image was a door, each door a memory. The house hadn't just taken him, it had absorbed him. He wasn't in the house. He was now a part of it. His voice finally arrived, not through lungs, but through thought, rising up like heat. Why me? He asked. Why always me? The house responded by showing him the truth. Not all at once. but in chapters. First, it showed the moment he brought Kenny. The way he had held the door open, how the shadows had gathered around his feet, eager. Then it showed the years after, the way he had forgotten, been allowed to forget. Every success, every smile, a gift handed down in exchange for silence. His life had been carefully written for him, a story constructed to distract him from the original sin. But the house never forgets a name, and the story always waits to be finished. You were not the first, the house said, but you were the most obedient. Nathan tried to deny it, but truth lives differently in the walls. It doesn't bend, it presses. More rooms spun into existence around him, each one containing a version of himself. The liar, the coward, the forgetter, the boy who locked the door, the man who chose to ignore the voice, the adult who tried to outrun the children he left behind. One of them was screaming. Another was smiling. He drifted past them all until he arrived at a room with no floor, just a chair and a notebook. His notebook, the first one he ever used to write stories. He recognized the childish scrawl, the half-formed ideas. But the last page was new. In ink darker than night, the final sentence read, "You belong to the house now." But stories can be rewritten. The moment he read it, pain bloomed through him. Not physical, but narrative. Like something tearing through the meaning of his existence. He clung to the sentence, repeated it in his mind over and over. Stories can be rewritten. Stories can be rewritten. And the house shivered. It noticed. Because in all its years of collecting names, trapping souls, swallowing childhoods whole, it had never considered one thing, that a story might still fight back from the inside. Nathan leaned into that crack, not to escape, but to change the rules. He turned toward the hallway, toward the rooms of the forgotten, toward the ones whose faces he had erased to survive, and he remembered them. Lucy, who loved to draw, Tam, who used to wear a cape made of a towel, Marlon, who never stopped asking questions, Kenny, who had followed him not because of trust, but because he had no one else. With every name Nathan remembered, a door in the house screamed open. Rooms groaned. Floors buckled. Mirrors wept. The house was confused, not scared, not yet, but interrupted. It had digested so many for so long, it had never expected one of its stories to turn inward. "You don't own me," Nathan said aloud. Though there was no mouth. "You wrote me," he said. "But I'm taking the pen back." From the far end of the dark, something ancient stirred. Heavy, curious. The house was listening now. The house did not breathe like a living thing. It thought. Slow, cold, incalculable. And now it was thinking about Nathan. The moment he refused to be eaten quietly, the entire structure had begun to adjust. The walls were no longer static. They rippled, stretched, rearranged. The wallpaper wept. The floors whispered. The light that had always flickered on cue now swung violently, like the house was shaking something loose in its rafters. A tremor of thought, not fear. It didn't understand how he was still speaking, let alone changing things from inside. But it was curious. It didn't know how to stop him yet. Nathan floated through its veins like a memory that had refused to die. His body, if it still existed at all, had long since been taken. But this wasn't about the body anymore. It never had been. The house didn't keep you for your flesh. It wanted your story. And now, Nathan was rewriting his. Each name he remembered carved open another room. Lucy's name made the walls pulse pink, the color of her favorite chalk. Tam's name cracked open a closet filled with capes and comic books she never finished drawing. Marlon's room was lined with jars, each one filled with water and light bulbs, his failed experiments glimmering quietly. Each space was tender, real, personal. And in every one of them, a fragment of a child still remained. Not their whole self, but pieces the house hadn't known how to digest. Laughter it couldn't mimic. Tears it couldn't bottle. Echoes of who they were, not just what they'd become when the walls took them. Nathan passed through each room, touching the stories he'd buried. With every memory, his shape became more defined. No longer just awareness. He could feel his form remerging, faint, flickering, but real. Not physical, but narrative. He was rebuilding his identity thread by painful thread, and the house began to twitch. Rooms shook. Doors slammed. A voice rose from the floorboards. Not the voice of the girl, not of the mirror man, not even the stitched mouth thing that had once chased Nathan through his childhood nightmares. This voice was the house itself. Low. Wet. It sounded like someone trying to speak through water. You were written. Nathan turned toward the sound. Then I can write myself again. You are not an author. You are an ending. No, he whispered. Not this time. The house growled. The walls trembled. And then they grew. New corridors unfolded before him like paper being uncrumpled. Rooms he had never seen before. Rooms that did not belong to any memory. He had pushed too far, and now the house was improvising, making up new spaces to trap him. The first room looked like a hospital waiting room, except all the chairs faced away from the center, and in that center, a TV with a blank screen hummed like a breathing lung. Nathan stepped in and the door sealed behind him. He tried to turn back, but the wall had gone smooth, seamless. The screen lit up. His face appeared on it, but not the Nathan he knew. This version of him was in his 20s, well-dressed, smiling confidently, surrounded by friends. A party, a birthday, a life he never lived. The house was trying to seduce him, to show him the life it had built for him outside its walls, the one it had offered as a reward for his silence. A life without guilt, without memory, but it was hollow. He knew it now. He stepped forward. The image grew brighter. The faces of the friends turned toward him, but their eyes were empty. Mouths wrong, laughing without sound. Nathan reached for the TV and ripped it off the stand. The screen shattered on the floor. The walls screamed. He stepped through the broken screen like a doorway and emerged into a school hallway. But everything was tilted. The lockers stretched too high. The floor dipped and rippled like waves frozen mid-motion. The air was heavy with the smell of pencil shavings and wet paper. And at the far end, a figure small, a child, Kenny. Not the version that survived. Not the boy whispering mantras in the dark. But the moment it all changed. The instant Kenny turned to follow Nathan into the woods. That soft look of trust in his eyes. The slight drag in his walk. Nathan stepped toward him. But the hallway bent. He stumbled, hit the ground. The floor peeled away like skin, revealing teeth beneath the tile. The house was done playing. It had indulged his memory. Now it would drown him in its own. The hallway shifted into a church, then a graveyard, then a room filled with water. He couldn't breathe, couldn't see, just spinning, falling, forcing him to forget again. And then, a voice, her voice, the girl, the one who never blinked. You're deeper than anyone, she said calmly. That's why it's afraid of you. Nathan coughed. The water vanished. The room reassembled itself, this time as a simple, empty bedroom with cracked yellow wallpaper. He looked up. She sat on the bed, feet dangling, hands folded. You're not supposed to remember this much, she said. No one does. He shook his head. Why me? She looked almost sad. Because you brought the first key. He blinked. What? She tapped her chest. You opened the house. You didn't build it. But you made it aware. You were the first child who didn't run. The first to look it in the eyes and say, what can I get for this? Nathan felt bile rise in his throat. No, I didn't. I was scared. Everyone is scared, she said. But most kids scream and run. You listened, and that's how it started growing. He fell back against the wall. Everything spun. So what, I'm the villain? No, she said softly. You're the prologue. He laughed, bitter, broken. Then how do I end it? She stood. You don't. Nathan stared at her. Then why help me? Because you gave it a voice, Nathan. But you can also give it a silence. She stepped closer. The house is strong because it's been fed by forgetting. But now, you're remembering. And memory is a knife. She placed something in his hand. It wasn't a weapon. It was a photograph. His fifth grade class. The last one they took before the disappearances. Lucy, Marlon, Tam, Kenny, himself. He closed his hand around it and felt real. The house groaned. Something ancient and wounded shifted behind the walls. Nathan opened his eyes, looked around, and said aloud, "I remember all of you." The floor cracked. The ceiling howled. The house screamed. And the walls bled light. The house didn't crumble. It didn't shatter or burn. It remembered. Nathan could feel it as soon as he spoke the names. Not just in the walls or the floor, but in the strange, pulsing memory that made up the air around him. The house was no longer just reacting to him. It was processing him, like an animal tasting something bitter for the first time. His defiance, his clarity, it wasn't just rebellion. It was poison, but it was slow. The house had been feeding on forgetfulness for so long that the sudden force of memory had staggered it. Now it recoiled. The walls turned in on themselves. Corridors reversed like ink bleeding back into a pen, and entire rooms collapsed without sound. The floor beneath Nathan's feet began to unravel into spirals of dark wood, spinning in slow, grinding rotations. But he didn't fall. He stood, still gripping the photograph. He stared at the face in the middle of the image, his own, smiling. Innocent. Before the guilt. Before the door. Before the house opened its mouth and spoke for the first time. He had always believed the house was found. That it existed long before him. That he and the others had simply stumbled upon it. But he had been wrong. So wrong. Because the truth was buried deep, and now it was rising. The girl appeared again, no longer small and childlike. She was older now. Taller, her voice deeper, more knowing. As if time was flowing through her in reverse. "You're ready," she said. Nathan didn't reply. He didn't need to. She nodded toward the collapsing walls, where a seam had opened, long and thin and bleeding white light. "This is where it started." "Where you started." He stepped toward it. The light burned, but it didn't blind. And as he crossed the threshold, the world folded into a shape that felt older than time. Suddenly, he was standing in a bedroom. Not the house. Not yet. Just a bedroom. Small. Bare. Carpeted in blue. Posters on the wall. Superheroes. Space shuttles. A racing car with flames. A nightstand with a little green lamp. A twin bed with a Spider-Man blanket. And on the pillow, a stuffed elephant with one eye missing. His bedroom. Nathan's real bedroom. Before everything. It was a snapshot pulled from some buried corner of his memory, too precise to be a dream. He moved to the window. Outside was the yard, glowing orange in the afternoon sun. A bicycle lay on its side. The sky was cloudless. It was the last day before the first time he walked into the woods. He turned toward the bed. A version of himself sat there. Young, maybe 10, hunched over a spiral notebook, chewing the cap of a pen, eyes wide with thought, scribbling. And then he heard it again. That voice, soft, dry, familiar, not from behind, from within. One door, one name, one story. The voice he'd heard that day, crouched in the trees, daring the others to follow. The one he thought was his own imagination. But it hadn't come from nowhere. It came from here, from this room, from this moment. He stepped closer. The younger Nathan didn't see him. He was too focused on what he was writing. The spiral notebook had a title on the first page, "The House That Eats You." Nathan's stomach twisted. His younger self flipped the page, drew a door, read, then, beneath it, a list of names. Fictional, he'd thought. Random, except they weren't. Lucy, Tam, Marlon, Kenny, and finally Nathan. He watched the boy pause at that name. And then, with a slow, deliberate hand, draw a box around it. A room. His room. The first room. The first victim wasn't one of the other kids. It was himself. He had imagined the house, invented it, not knowing that names, when spoken with intent, when scribbled in fear, when carried by guilt, build. He had summoned it, or worse, he had opened the door for something that had been waiting to be named. That was the power of story. It's not just what you say, it's what you believe. And Nathan had believed in monsters. He had needed one. To blame, to fear, to become. Behind him. The girl spoke again. Once upon a time, you made something real. Because you were scared. Because you were alone. Because you wanted to matter. You didn't build the house. But you gave it walls. Nathan turned to face her. His voice cracked, like something ancient was speaking through him. I want to tear it down. You can't, she said. But you can rewrite it. How? Give it a new story. He looked at the notebook, picked it up. His younger self vanished, dissolved into the air like smoke burned too fast. He opened the first page. Still blank. Still waiting. The house shook. Hard this time. Angry. Not confused anymore. It remembered too much. Rooms crashed into each other. Mirrors shattered. Doorknobs screamed. But Nathan sat cross, legged in the center of his childhood bedroom, and wrote once, "There was a house that never let go." But then, one of the rooms remembered its own door, and it opened, not inward, not outward, but away. As he wrote, the walls peeled back. The sky cracked open, and the house began to scream in a new way. Not rage, not hunger, fear. Because for the first time, someone inside it wasn't just surviving. They were rewriting, not to escape, but to erase it, from within. The story didn't like being rewritten, not one bit. Nathan had barely finished the second sentence when the room began to distort. His childhood bedroom twisted like it had been gripped by invisible hands and wrung out like wet cloth. The ceiling stretched up into black. The bed sagged like melting wax, and the blue carpet curled up the walls like it wanted to escape itself. The notebook in his hands pulsed, glowed even, as if each word he wrote burned a nerve directly into the heart of the house. He looked down at the page. The ink had begun to fight him. Each letter he carved trembled, resisted. It wasn't just ink anymore. It was memory. And the house was trying to take it back. The red door he'd drawn was now leaking across the paper, smearing the rest of the sentence. The house was responding. It had accepted its role for too long. Hunter-jailer, keeper of lost names and stolen children. But it had never been challenged from the inside. Never by one of its own. Nathan stood slowly, the notebook clutched to his chest like a shield. The walls trembled violently now, as if they were holding in something vast and ancient straining to break free. He could feel it watching, not from one place, but everywhere. And then the girl's voice came, warped and distant. "It's changing your past." Nathan whipped around. The girl, older now, translucent, stood in the corner of the dissolving room. Her hands twitching like puppet strings were being yanked in opposite directions. "It's rewriting you," she said. "You opened a door. Now it's opening yours." He barely heard her over the creaking. No, not creaking, typing. The sound of keys clacking furiously, echoing from all around. The house was writing its own version, desperate to beat him to the final word. And then the door appeared. Not red, not black, but white, blank, untouched, glowing with a sickly purity. Above it, scrawled in jagged ink, was a single line Nathan never remembered. He staggered back. "No," he whispered, "that's not true." I do. The door pulsed, and then it opened. Inside was a memory, his first day of kindergarten. But wrong. His parents were faceless. The teacher's voice was backwards. The desk nameplate didn't say Nathan. It said subject. He slammed the notebook shut. The memory vanished. Another door appeared. This one showed his 8th birthday. Balloons twisted into nooses. A cake with no candles. Friends who never turned to face him. "Stop it!" he screamed. The house whispered back through the vents, through the floorboards, through the air. "You don't get to choose what's true. Only we do." Nathan dropped to his knees, forced the notebook open again, and jammed the pen onto the page. Nathan remembered. That was the beginning of the end. The doors flickered. Some slammed shut, others wailed. He wrote more, faster now, pushing back against the static filling his skull. The house wasn't always hungry. It was taught to be. Someone, something, named it, built it, then left it to grow on pain. But it could be starved. It could be made to forget, just like it made others forget. A new hallway split off from the room, unnatural and quick, like the house was panicking, trying to contain the damage. At the end of the hallway, a mirror. Tall, silver, smooth. It didn't reflect him. It showed scenes from his life. Every time he'd lied about what happened in the woods. Every time he'd looked the other way. Every time he'd felt the guilt but swallowed it whole. Behind him, the girl stepped forward, but her form flickered now. She was being pulled back, fading from existence. The house was erasing her. "It's gonna trap you in your own story," she said. "I know. You can't win." He looked up at the mirror. "I'm not here to win." He held the notebook tight. "I'm here to end the book." The mirror cracked, then shattered. The fragments hung in the air, spinning around him. Each one showed a version of himself the house had written. The silent boy, the coward, the betrayer, the villain. Nathan raised the notebook and began reading what he'd written aloud. Every word was a knife. The walls split. The floor convulsed. From deep within the house came a scream unlike anything he'd heard before. An ancient, furious sound. Not from a voice. From a system. From the very structure of the thing that had swallowed generations. The house was being named. And names hold power. Ashcroft was never real. Nathan read aloud. It was just the name we gave our fear so we wouldn't have to carry it alone. Rooms began to disintegrate, folding in on themselves, the architecture unraveling like a burning web. "We made the house," he continued. "We built it out of secrets and silence and shame, but it doesn't have to stand. Not anymore." The notebook caught fire in his hands, white flames. No heat, just truth. The girl smiled one last time before she vanished completely. The house made one final attempt. It built a room around him, perfectly reconstructed. His real home, his real life. Family photos, soft music, a breeze through the curtains. And on the table, a contract. One signature line. No tricks, no hidden terms. Just a simple offer. "Forget again. We'll give it all back." Nathan picked up the pen, stared at it, then dropped it, and said, "No story is worth telling if it ends in silence." The room burst. The house convulsed. Nathan stepped through the fire, through the wind, through the collapse of every lie, every manipulation, every trap it had laid. He walked forward, and everything else fell away. Silence, at last. Not the silence the house used to feed on. The kind that curled around your spine and suffocated truth. Not the hush that followed guilt, or the pause before a scream. This was something else. A silence that felt earned, weightless, whole. Nathan stood in the center of it, barefoot on a floor that no longer breathed or blood. The wood beneath him was warm, dry, and still. No whispers came from the corners. No distant creaks. The house was gone. No, it wasn't gone. It was finished. There was a difference. Ashcroft hadn't exploded in fire or light. There had been no grand collapse. It had unraveled quietly room by room, like a forgotten dream that no longer needed remembering. As Nathan read the final sentence from the burning notebook, the walls had simply stopped existing. The doors vanished. The stairs uncoiled like smoke. Every false memory folded itself into dust. And then it was just him, and the field. Because that's where he stood now. A field he hadn't seen in years. Where the woods used to begin. Where he and the others once played, dared, dreamed. The place before the house. Before he let the door open. Before names became currency. The sun was rising over the distant hills. Real sun. It touched his skin and didn't sting. The air moved naturally. No tension behind the breeze. No taste of rot. He turned slowly, expecting to see someone. Kenny, maybe. Or the girl. Or the younger version of himself who'd drawn the red door. But there was no one. Just the quiet sway of grass and the far, off caw of a crow flying home. Nathan took a step forward, and felt something under his foot. He crouched, pushed aside the grass, and found a small, rusted object buried in the soil. A doorknob, detached. Dead, cold metal half swallowed by earth. It didn't pulse, didn't whisper. just lay there like a bone from something that had once been terrible and alive, now long dead and still. He didn't pick it up. He left it there, let it sleep. Instead, he walked. Every step away from where the house had stood felt lighter, though the weight of it all, the memories, the names, the faces, stayed with him. They weren't gone. But they weren't haunting anymore. They were anchoring. He whispered their names as he walked. Not to summon them, not to trap them, just to honor them. Lucy Tam, Marlon, Kenny. And when he said Kenny's name, something inside him pulsed. Not pain, just warmth. A second later, his phone buzzed. Yes, his phone. He hadn't even realized it had returned to his pocket. The screen flickered on. One message. We're good now. Keep walking. Nathan stared at it for a long moment, heart hammering, not with fear, but with relief so deep it felt like a sob. He typed back, "Where are you?" The reply came instantly. "Somewhere quiet. Don't try to find me." A beat. Then another message. "Tell our story right." Nathan nodded, as if Kenny could see him, then slid the phone back into his pocket. As the sun continued to rise, he saw a road stretching out ahead of him, old and cracked but solid. Real. A direction. He didn't know where it would lead. That was fine. Stories didn't need perfect endings. They just needed to end, and this one had. No twist, no screams, no closing door. Just a man walking away from a house that would never breathe again, and a promise not to forget, not to fear, but to remember right. The house was gone, but its shadow wasn't. Nathan learned this the hard way. 1 week after the morning he walked out of the field barefoot. After the sun touched his skin like it had been waiting. He'd told himself it was over, that the story had closed. But stories, he was beginning to understand, don't die when the house falls. They ripple. They echo. And echoes, if left unspoken, start to pretend they're real. He was in a grocery store when he saw the first one. A woman, mid-30s, pushing a cart full of nothing but soup cans. Same brand, stacked in twos, neat as teeth. Her eyes never blinked. Her smile never moved. It was fixed. Not wrong, exactly. Just stuck. Nathan might have looked past her, chalked it up to strange behavior, but when he turned into the next aisle, she was already there. No sound. No steps. Just there. He left the store without buying anything. On the walk home, he saw another. An old man standing on a porch, watering a plant that wasn't in a pot. Just a memory of one. The water disappeared before it touched anything. The hose wasn't connected, and the man's lips moved, whispering something over and over. Nathan crossed the street. By the third sighting, 2 teenagers frozen mid-laugh in a diner window. Forks raised but never moving. Nathan understood these weren't ghosts. They were fragments. Pieces of people who had come too close to the house's story at some point in their lives, and were never fully let go. The house may have been finished, burned out from the inside by his memory, but it had scattered remnants into the world. Unfinished chapters, dangling sentences, people whose truths were half erased. Echo people. He hadn't destroyed the story, he just stopped it from growing. But the rot was still in the walls of the world, and now he could see it. He didn't sleep much that week. Dreams were too brittle, too loud. The girl with the unblinking eyes sometimes appeared in the corner of his room, not haunting, just watching. Reminding him, she never spoke, never blinked, but she was always holding the notebook, the one that burned in the house. Only now it was full again, and every page, he knew without reading, was written in his handwriting. By the 5th day, the signs became undeniable. His reflection would sometimes smile a second too long. His own voice on voicemails would say things he didn't remember recording. People he passed on the street would mouth things at him, like a prayer or a warning. He couldn't hear them, but he knew they were saying the same thing. You ended the house. Now in the echoes. He didn't know how. Not yet. Until he saw her, Tam. She was supposed to be gone. He'd seen her swallowed. Her scream had followed him for years, until the story released it. But there she was, outside a rundown school in a town he didn't even remember driving to. Standing under a flickering street lamp at dusk, wearing the same green hoodie she'd had the day it happened. Still 11 years old. Frozen. Alive, but not living. Nathan stepped off the curb, approached slowly. "Tam," he said. Her head turned toward him. Slow, mechanical, then the lights blinked out. All of them. And when they came back on, she was gone. But in her place, on the sidewalk, was a photograph. Not old, not torn, fresh. Tam, smiling, holding a small cardboard sign. One word written on it, room. Nathan picked it up with shaking hands. He turned it over, and there, in his own handwriting, was the sentence that changed everything. The house left keys behind. Not to open, but to close. He didn't know how it had gotten there. Didn't remember writing it, but he believed it. Tam was trapped. Not inside the house anymore, but inside a story fragment that had broken off when the structure fell. She was living in a loop, disconnected from the narrative, frozen in time, repeating her last truth. The house hadn't taken her. It had scattered her. And now, it was up to Nathan to gather the pieces. Not to bring them back. Not to return to the nightmare. But to seal the cracks in the story. To find every echo, every fragment, and close the room. It wouldn't be easy. Each person was a chapter half erased. Each place a sentence unfinished. He'd need to find them. Speak their names. Remind them they existed. And then, only then, could he finish their stories. But he wasn't sure he could do it alone. So he made one call. Kenny answered on the first ring. "You saw her?" Kenny asked. "I did." Pause. Then Kenny said, "They're all still here. Some don't know their echoes. Some think they're alive. Some are alive, but wrong. I've been tracking them. You knew. I never stopped." Nathan closed his eyes. "What do I do?" There was a silence. Then Kenny said, "You already have the notebook, don't you?" Nathan looked to the nightstand. There it was. Fresh. Bound in black cloth. Waiting. He opened the first page. Blank, except for a title. Ashcroft the Unfinished. Beneath it, a sentence appeared as if written in real time, one by one. The rooms remembered themselves. And one by one, he found them. Nathan didn't write it, but it was his story now, and he was ready to finish what he started. Somewhere in the north side of town, tucked between two silent warehouses and a collapsed bridge, stood a diner that had never officially opened, yet never quite closed. It didn't show up on maps. The signage was half lit, flickering between E8 and an AT. No one Nathan spoke to remembered when it had been built, and the ones who did wouldn't say its name out loud. This was where the first echo hid, not behind a locked door, not in some haunted clearing, but in plain sight, smeared into the everyday world, invisible to anyone who hadn't survived the house. Nathan stepped through the front doors of the diner, with a chill threading through his spine. The bell above the door didn't ring, it hissed, a breath of warning, a memory disguised as sound. The booths were all occupied, but no one looked up. The same red vinyl seats, the same black and white floor tiles, the same soft static from a jukebox that never played music. Everything too still, too posed. He could tell right away, these weren't customers. These were scenes, ghosts of a story stuck on repeat. Then he saw her. Booth 7. Marlon's sister. Elise. He hadn't thought of her in years, not since Marlon vanished and she'd gone off the grid. They were inseparable. Those two. Elise always trailing behind her brother like his shadow. But when the house took Marlon, Elise disappeared too. Everyone assumed she'd moved away, maybe to live with relatives. No one looked too hard. Ashcroft had that effect. But there she was now. Sitting stiffly, a menu in her hands that she wasn't reading. Eyes darting left and right like they were following lines on a script only she could see. Nathan approached the table. Every step forward seemed to bend the light around him, like reality itself didn't want him to get too close. "Elise," he said softly. She didn't look up. He tried again. "Elise, it's me, Nathan." Nothing, not a flinch. but the lights in the diner dimmed slightly. A pulse ran through the floor. Something under the surface of this place had hurt him. He sat across from her. The menu in her hands trembled. "Elise," he said again, "you don't have to stay here. This place isn't real. It's a memory, a broken one. A room that forgot what it was." Still nothing. But her eyes were wet now. Not blinking, just gathering tears that didn't fall. He reached across the table and gently placed his hand on hers. That's when the ceiling opened. Not physically, but narratively. The air above them rippled, peeled like paper, and from the rift above, dozens of photos fell. Each one a snapshot of Elise and Marlon. Riding bikes. Building pillow forts. Drawing comics together. Playing in the field before the woods swallowed their joy. The photos hit the table like falling feathers. Elise blinked. Just once. "Nathan," she whispered. He squeezed her hand. "Yes, I'm here." Her head turned, slow and cracking, like a puppet fighting its strings. "I was waiting for him," she said. "I thought if I just stayed in this place, he'd come in through the door, that the story would change. That maybe I'd rewrite it myself." Nathan nodded slowly. "That's how the house works," he said. "It makes you wait. Makes you believe waiting is a kind of hope." She looked around, and for the first time, he saw it in her face, the knowledge, the recognition. The diner began to fade around the edges. The lights faltered. The jukebox gurgled out a few dying notes. "You left," she said. "You got out." "I did." "Did you save him?" Nathan shook his head. "But I remember him." The air behind her rippled. The booth across from them collapsed into smoke. The echo was destabilizing. Alyssa's form flickered. "Am I real?" she asked. "You're remembered," Nathan said. "That's enough." She nodded, and the booth turned to ash. The entire diner cracked, like glass hit by a hammer. Just once, but deep. Tables folded in on themselves, plates split like skin. Coffee spilled upward into the ceiling and vanished. All around them, the echo of the room collapsed like a bad lie. But Elise remained, not her 11-year-old self, not a girl frozen in time, but her now. Real age, real voice, real tears streaming down her face as she sat on the cracked tile of a place that no longer existed. Nathan crouched beside her. "You're back," he said. She looked up, nodded, then smiled. Not the eerie, mannequin grin of the diner echo, but a real messy, tired smile. "I heard him, she said. "Just before the booth went. I heard Marlon's laugh." Nathan's chest ached. "He'd be proud of you," he said. She nodded again, then asked, "How many more?" He stood, looked toward the space where the door used to be. "Too many." Elise stood with him. "I'll help." Nathan handed her the notebook. The page flipped on its own, and there, in fresh ink, was a new title, Room 2, The Boy in the Playground. They didn't say a word. They just walked out into the morning light together. Two people who had once been written into silence. Now writing back. The swing moved by itself, slow, rhythmic, and constant. Like a heartbeat, it didn't creak, it didn't groan. It simply moved, as though it had always been swinging, even before the rust took the chains or the playground became a place adults avoided. They reached it at dawn. Elise spotted the boy first. Small frame, legs dangling just a few inches off the sand. He wasn't pumping his legs to move. The swing just kept going, like gravity and time had decided he didn't belong to them. He faced forward, eyes blank, mouth slightly open, not smiling, not afraid, just still. Nathan felt it in his bones the moment he stepped past the iron gate. This place had once held laughter, scraped knees, secret dares under slides. Now it was heavy with the weight of a story paused mid-sentence. The trees didn't sway. The shadows didn't stretch. The sandbox was undisturbed. The seesaw rusted mid-tilt. Time had curled itself around this spot and refused to move forward. Elise stepped beside him, silent. She hadn't spoken much since they left the diner. She didn't need to. They were both feeling the same thing now. The echo wasn't just clinging to people. It was places too. Ashcroft had bled into the world like ink in water. and this playground was soaked with it. Nathan moved forward cautiously. He knew the boy, not by name, but from that day. The day after Tam disappeared. There had been whispers about another kid, younger than the rest, who wandered into the woods looking for her. No one ever confirmed it. No missing poster. No parents came forward. But Nathan had always remembered the rumor, because there was something off about it. Like the memory wasn't fully his. Like someone had tried to bury it and left the job unfinished. And here the boy was. Same age as the rumor suggested, maybe 8. Same striped shirt, same dirt-smudged sneakers. 17 years later. Still swinging. Nathan approached slowly, each footstep pushing against an invisible pressure in the air. The closer he got, the harder it was to breathe. Not suffocation. Just an overwhelming weight, like standing too close to someone else's grief. He knelt in front of the boy. "What's your name?" Nathan asked gently. No response. The boy's eyes didn't meet his. Elise stepped forward. Crouched beside him. She pulled the notebook from her bag, flipped to the fresh page. The title still glowed faintly. Room 2, The Boy in the Playground. She pressed her finger to the blank space beneath it. Ink began to rise like breath on glass. A sentence appeared. He waited because the story forgot to end him. The boy blinked. Just once. But it was enough. Nathan leaned in. "You're not supposed to be here anymore. The house is gone. You can stop swinging." The boy's legs twitched. The chains clinked. And then his mouth moved. Not much. Not loud. Just a whisper. "Elise." They both froze. Nathan turned to Elise, but she looked just as stunned. "I don't know him," she said. But the boy repeated it. "Elise. Elise didn't come back. I waited," she promised. "I waited." A memory cracked in Nathan's mind, not his own. A drawing in Marlone's journal. A sketch of the playground. A note scribbled beside it. "Met a boy. Said he heard the house call my sister. Said she told him to wait. Thought it was a game." Nathan looked at Elise. "You were here." "I was never." She stopped, swallowed. "I don't remember being here." "The house made you forget," Nathan said. "But you talked to him. Right after Marlon disappeared. You were looking for a way back." She stared at the boy. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition buried deep. Fragile and sharp. A memory, too thin to hold but too loud to ignore. "I told him I'd come back for him," she whispered. "I thought it was a dream. A fake memory. I forgot." The notebook pulsed. More words appeared. She didn't lie. She was stolen from the moment. Now she returns. The swing can stop. Elise stepped forward. The boy's swing began to slow. The chains moved less with each pass. His legs stopped twitching. His lips trembled. "You came back," he said, tears welling. "I did," Elise whispered. "I'm sorry I forgot. But I'm here now. You can let go." The boy looked at her. Really looked. For the first time. And then he smiled. Not the broken, looped smile of an echo. A true smile. The swing came to a stop. The ground shivered. Not violently. Not like fear. Like breath being exhaled after too long held in. The boy faded. Not into dust, not into light. Into rest. A peace Nathan hadn't known the echoes could feel. Elise collapsed to her knees. Nathan caught her before she hit the ground. "You did it," he said. "No," she whispered. "We did." The playground changed. The rust faded from the slide. The seesaw righted itself. The air lightened. The notebook in Elise's hand fluttered, pages turning on their own. And there it was. Room 3, the man in the mirror who isn't you. Nathan met her eyes. This was just the beginning. The house might have died. But the echoes, they were everywhere. And together, they would close them all. They didn't speak much on the drive. The road stretched endlessly, bordered by thick trees that seemed to lean in too close, as if trying to overhear the silence between Nathan and Elise. The notebook rested between them, untouched but not idle. It thrummed with quiet energy, its pages pulsing like it was breathing, like it was waiting. Every few miles, Nathan would glance at it, half expecting it to burst open or bleed ink across the seats. But it remained still. The only sign of what was coming was the page they'd last read, still emblazoned with a title that made the back of Nathan's neck crawl. Room 3, The Man in the Mirror Who Isn't You. When they reached the house, it looked ordinary. That was the first warning. Too ordinary. The lawn was cut. The porch was swept. The curtains in the windows moved ever so slightly, like someone was inside adjusting them just for show. There were no signs of rot, no cracked siding, no creeping vines choking the gutters. But Nathan could feel it in his stomach. The same wrongness as before. The kind that doesn't announce itself with screams, but whispers behind your eyes. The kind that makes your reflection blink before you do. They stood on the porch for a moment before Nathan rang the bell. Chime. A perfect sound. One too clean to be natural. A few seconds passed. Then the door opened, and Nathan saw himself. It wasn't like the mirror version was a twisted monster. No jagged teeth. No black eyes. No obvious distortions. That would have been easy to fight. This was worse. The man who opened the door was exactly like Nathan. Same clothes. Same haircut. Same faint scar under his lip from when he'd tripped on a bike at 11. But his eyes were wrong. They weren't hostile. They were calm. Too calm. As if this Nathan had never faced anything. As if his story had been clean, without loss, without blood. A version of himself untouched by the house. "Hey, the mirror," Nathan said, voice smooth and casual. "Been expecting you." Elise tensed beside the real Nathan, her hand instinctively reaching for the notebook. "Who are you?" Nathan asked, already knowing the answer. "I'm the version of you who never opened the door," the reflection said. "The version who walked away, never met Tam, never lost Kenny, never saw the house. You're not real." The double shrugged. "Neither are most of your memories. But they still hurt, don't they?" He stepped aside, gesturing toward the inside of the house. "Come in. Let me show you what your life could have been." Nathan hesitated. The mirror, Nathan tilted his head. "Afraid?" "No," Nathan said. "I just don't trust versions of myself who answer the door smiling." That earned a chuckle. A strange sound, hollow and flat. But Nathan stepped inside, and Elise followed. The interior was worse than the outside. Because it was perfect. Photos on the walls of a family Nathan didn't remember having. Trophies he never won. Books he never wrote. All staged with surgical precision. Every inch of the house was a lie. A curated delusion, built to seduce, not scare. The kind of lie you want to believe. "This isn't a room," Elise whispered. "It's a trap." "No," the reflection said, following them in, closing the door behind. "It's a gift. All you have to do is stay. Be me. Let go of your guilt. Your pain. I'll take it from you." "And what happens to the real me?" Nathan asked. "I am the real you, just one decision removed. You've been through enough, haven't you?" "Don't you deserve this?" Nathan looked at Elise. Her expression was hard now. Focused. "Where's the mirror?" she asked. The reflection hesitated. Only for a second. But it was enough. Nathan bolted deeper into the house. The double cursed and followed. Room after room passed. Each one a version of something Nathan had wanted once. A birthday with both parents laughing. A bookshelf filled with his stories. A photograph of Tam grown up, alive, hugging Elise. None of it real. He found the mirror in the basement. Tall. Wide. Framed in black wood that pulsed faintly, like veins just beneath skin. It didn't reflect the room. It didn't even reflect him. It reflected choice. The longer he stared, the more versions of himself he saw. Nathan the coward. Nathan the monster. Nathan the forgetful. Nathan the liar. Nathan the survivor. And behind them all, flickering at the edges, stood the reflection he'd just met, the one who greeted him at the door. Calm. Empty. Perfect. The false Nathan appeared beside him. "You could stay here forever," he said. "Leave without regret. Let me carry your past." "No," Nathan whispered. "Why not?" "Because if I stay, I'm not me anymore. I'm just another echo." And with that, he reached for the mirror. It burned. Not his skin, his story. It tried to take his memories. Peel them away. replace them with this fantasy. But Nathan gritted his teeth and slammed his palm into the glass. It cracked. The reflection screamed. Elise appeared behind them, notebook open. Reading aloud, he saw what he could have been, and chose who he was instead. The mirror splintered. The reflection twisted, now snarling, mouth distorting, trying to climb out of the breaking glass. But it was too late. Nathan pushed forward and punched the center. The mirror shattered completely, and the house sighed. Not a collapse. A release. The false trophies vanished. The smiling photos curled and burned. The silence gave way to nothing. Not dread, not danger, just absence. Elise closed the notebook. They stood in the basement, surrounded by broken glass, breathing hard. "That wasn't just a version of you," she said. "That was the temptation of you, I know. And the worst part." Nathan looked at her. She answered her own question. It almost worked. He nodded. "Yeah." They walked out of the hollow house as the morning sun caught the jagged shards of mirror on the floor, scattering light like shattered lies. On the next page of the notebook, new ink began to bleed through. "Room 4, the mouth that sings your secrets." Elise turned the page. Nathan exhaled. "We keep going." She smiled faintly. "We keep going." The static began before they even reached the hill. At first, Nathan thought it was just interference. Radio bleed from some nearby tower, or maybe the hum of an old transformer. But the deeper they drove into the valley, the louder it got. Not louder in volume, louder in presence. It was in the air, thick and brittle, buzzing just beneath the skin. Elise felt it too. She kept touching the notebook on her lap, flipping it open every few minutes to read the title, as if doing so would change it. "Room 4, the mouth that sings your secrets." Neither of them spoke. What could they say? The last echo had nearly broken Nathan, not with pain, but with comfort. A mirror that offered peace without truth. But this one wasn't pretending to be safe. This one wanted to be heard. The station sat at the top of the hill like a rotten tooth. Small, square, surrounded by antennas and cables that twitched despite the absence of wind. The building itself was no bigger than a convenience store, but it felt massive, as if something beneath it stretched down into the earth and pulsed in rhythm with the static. The closer they came, the more the hum shaped itself, first into white noise, then into something like breathing, then finally words. Not spoken, sung, just barely. Whispers curled into melody, wrapped in distortion. Not one voice, hundreds, interweaving, overlapping. They didn't echo off the walls. They grew from them. Nathan stepped out of the car. Immediately, a chill cut through his jacket and settled in his spine. Elise followed. The notebook's newest page fluttered like it was alive. Words crawled across the surface in looping script. It doesn't hide. It performs. It doesn't ask. It sings. The door to the station was ajar, and behind it, darkness and voices. So many voices. Some crying, some laughing, some repeating the same phrase over and over like a broken record. Nathan pushed the door open and stepped inside. He was swallowed by sound. Not deafening, not loud, but total, complete. As though the space inside the station didn't hold air, only secrets. The walls were lined with old reel-to-reel recorders, each still turning. Cassette decks blinked and whirred, though no power source was visible. There were speakers stacked on top of each other in impossible shapes, pointed at each other, at the floor, at the ceiling. And from every speaker came the same thing. A song, but no ordinary song. It shifted every few seconds, modulating in tone, rhythm, and meaning. Each voice sang something personal, something that was never supposed to be known. Nathan stepped closer to one of the speakers and heard Kenny's voice. Clear, tired, cracking with guilt. "I told them I didn't hear her scream, but I did. I just didn't move fast enough." Nathan flinched. Elise moved beside him, pale. "This place records secrets," she whispered, "and it sings them." Nathan nodded, "And plays them for anyone who'll listen." They walked deeper into the room. More voices, some familiar, some not. One sang about hiding a letter that should have been delivered. Another whispered a confession of wishing someone hadn't been found. But then, they both heard it. A child's voice. Clear, melodic. I drew the red door because he told me to. But I didn't know it would open. I just wanted a friend. Nathan froze. That's me. Elise looked at him. You don't remember saying that? I never said it. Not out loud. That means this place isn't just singing secrets it heard. It's singing things we buried. Suddenly, all the reels stopped spinning. Every speaker silenced. The air was too quiet. Then, from the back of the room, a curtain lifted, revealing a stage, small, wooden, lit by a single hanging bulb, and on it stood a figure, thin, wrapped in a patchwork of audio tape and microphone wire. No face, just a mouth, massive, grinning. It didn't move. But the speakers hissed, then sang a new tune, Nathan's voice. I knew what the house did, but I didn't stop it, because part of me wanted to see. Elise stepped forward, shut it off. Nathan stared at the mouth. I don't know how. The notebook vibrated in Elise's hand. Another line formed. A secret becomes a cage only when it's hidden, but a song loses power when it's heard. Nathan looked at the stage again. So that was it. It wasn't about hiding from the secrets. It was about owning them. He stepped onto the stage. The mouth grinned wider. Nathan faced the speakers. I did hear her scream, he said, voice strong, and I froze, and I've hated myself every day since. The tapes trembled. He turned. I wanted to see what the house would do. Not because I was evil, but because I was curious. And that cost Levs. The mouth shrieked. Not sound, just void, as if it couldn't feed off truth, only shame. Elise stepped up beside him. I did lie about where I was the night Marlon disappeared, she said. Because I thought if I admitted it, the house would take me too. The reel-to-reel machines began to melt. The speakers cracked. The mouth twitched violently. Nathan shouted now, "We're not your choir anymore!" And with that, Elise flung the notebook down. The page burned white. A final line seared itself across the cover. Room 4 closed. The mouth collapsed in on itself. The sound died. Not faded. Died. The air felt human again. Nathan stepped off the stage. His legs shook. Elise caught him. They didn't speak. Just sat there on the edge of the ruined room breathing. Eventually, the notebook flipped again. Room 5, the door that dreams and teeth. Nathan didn't even flinch. We go, he said. Elise nodded, but neither of them missed the whisper that came from one last surviving speaker. Broken, warped, barely audible. Some songs never end. Sleep became dangerous the moment they opened the 5th page. Not dramatic nightmares. Not blood on the walls or screams in the dark. That would have been easy. This was worse. These dreams waited just out of reach, luring Nathan and Elise toward rest with the promise of peace, and then gutting them with what lay beneath. The moment Nathan blinked too long, leaned back too far, let his thoughts drift, it started. A low gnashing, like teeth grinding behind a door, and behind that sound, something breathing through the cracks in his thoughts. Something watching him from the other side of his own skull. He didn't tell Elise the first night, and when they both awoke in the morning gasping for air. They didn't have to say it out loud to know they'd had the same dream. A hallway. Too long, too narrow. And at the end a door. Not just any door. This one was made of flesh, throbbing, covered in tiny, clenched mouths instead of knots in the wood. Hundreds, some with baby teeth, some with fangs, some stitched shut, some whispering secrets they weren't supposed to know. The handle was a molar, huge, yellow, pulled from something very old, and written in blood above the frame WRLOU, Joe Tuaka UPW Orange. They didn't talk about the dream on the drive the next day. The notebook didn't need to give them directions. The road had already begun twisting toward the door the moment they read its title. Room 5, the door that dreams in teeth. It wasn't a location, it was a state, a layer, something you fell into slowly like tar. The town around them looked normal at first glance. But Nathan noticed how every house had its curtains drawn, even at noon. How every street lamp flickered in perfect, timed intervals, like a heartbeat sensing up with something beneath the ground. The sun was out, but the shadows didn't quite match their owners. A woman walking a dog on the sidewalk had no reflection in the puddles. A kid on a bike looped the same block 3 times without ever moving forward. They were inside the dream already, wide awake. "Do you feel it?" Elise asked, gripping the notebook like a shield. Nathan nodded. "It's starting early." That night, they slept in shifts, or tried to, but time didn't move like it should here. At 2:07 a.m., Nathan blinked, and it was 3:12 a.m. Elise stood at the foot of his bed, eyes closed, whispering to herself. He called her name. She didn't respond, just kept muttering something low and rhythmic. He rose and crossed the room. He touched her shoulder, and her eyes snapped open, black, not just dark, absent, as if her eyes had turned into holes cut through the fabric of the world. Then she whispered, "It's dreaming us back." She collapsed, and they both woke up on the floor of a different room. Not the motel, not even a room that made sense. The walls were stitched together from pages of diaries, each one humming with the voice of whoever wrote it. A child, a priest, a woman whispering apologies. The air smelled like iron and something sweet, like candy rotting in a child's pocket. The door stood in front of them, throbbing, waiting. Nathan didn't move. Elise stirred beside him, still clutching the notebook. Its newest page now said, "Some rooms don't trap people. They trap versions." She looked at the door. The mouths moved. They sang, not in a language Nathan knew, not even with melody. Just a wet, grinding sound that burrowed into the softest parts of his mind, his memories, his guilt, his regrets. He heard a whisper from the door, "In this one you stayed. You became part of the house." He stepped forward. The door pulsed in response. A few of the mouths opened wider, revealing more teeth than they should have had. Some whispered old dreams he'd once forgotten. Others hissed possibilities that made his blood chill. But one mouth, larger than the others, spoke his name. Nathan, it cooed. Nathan who chose the story. Nathan who let it write him. Elise caught up, her voice shaking. "It's not just a door. It's a decision." Nathan swallowed. "We have to go through." "Are you sure? If we don't, we'll stay trapped in someone else's ending." Together, they grabbed the molar handle. The door did not open. It bit, clenched around their hands, locking their grip in a fleshy vice. The room spun. The mouths laughed. And then, everything went black. When Nathan opened his eyes, he was standing in a version of his childhood bedroom. Only it wasn't his. The walls were familiar, but the posters were wrong. His books were in a different order. The photograph of him and Kenny was replaced by one with a stranger. Same smile, different eyes. He heard footsteps. Another Nathan walked in, older, thinner, wearing the same clothes as him. He looked directly at Nathan. "You don't belong here," the other said. "I could say the same." The stranger tilted his head. "This is my dream. You walked through my door." Elise wasn't with him. Nathan's voice caught. "Where is she?" "She stayed outside," the reflection said. "Where she was safe. Where you should have stayed." The room dissolved. The two Nathans now stood in the hallway again. The door behind him closed with a wet click. Hundreds of other doors now surrounded them, each one breathing. Nathan knew what this was. Every door led to a version of himself, every one a trap. He had to choose the right one to find the real world again. But the mouths whispered lies. "This is who you were when you let Tam die. This is who you'd be if you'd said yes. This is who you'll become if you keep digging." Nathan closed his eyes and listened, not to the mouths, to himself, and from deep inside the silence he heard a voice. "Eliz's, you are more than what the house told you. You are more than the version that blood." He opened his eyes and saw a door that didn't breathe, didn't throb, didn't speak, just waited. He opened it, and on the other side was Elise, sitting in the motel room, clutching the notebook, eyes wide. Nathan. He stepped through and slammed the door shut behind him. The notebook hissed. Words formed, room 5 closed. The dream has teeth, but it only bites those who feed it. Nathan collapsed onto the bed. Elise wrapped her arms around him, and for the first time in what felt like days, neither of them dreamed, but they knew this wasn't over. The notebook flipped again. Room 6, the tree that remembers when you lied. And outside the window, they saw it already standing, tall, still, watching. It stood where the field used to be, not just a tree, a monument. A scar left behind by everything they thought they'd buried. The grass around it was dead for 20 feet in every direction. The soil, dark and cracked like something, had been trying to crawl out from underneath. Its branches weren't shaped by the wind, but by memory, twisting, bending, not to the sky, but backward, as though they were reaching toward moments long past and refusing to let go. The bark was scorched in places, split in others, and carved into its trunk, line after line of names. Some real, some forgotten, some never meant to be spoken again. Nathan's name was near the top, and just below it Elise. They didn't speak for a long time, just stood at the edge of the field, staring at the thing that should not have been there. The notebook didn't flutter, it didn't pulse. It simply sat, shut tight, as if it too knew that this wasn't a room to walk into. It was a room that knew you first. We lied here once, Elise finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan nodded slowly. We were just kids. That doesn't mean it didn't count. The notebook finally opened on its own. The page was simple. Only 2 sentences. Some roots are fed with stories, some with silence. This one, with lies. They stepped into the dead soil. With every step, the air thickened. The smell of sap turned bitter, sweet like syrup left too long in the sun. The ground gave slightly underfoot. Not mud, not rot, just wrong. As if the tree didn't grow from the earth, but from the weight of everything they'd ever tried to hide. When they reached the base of the tree, the wind picked up. Not cold, not strong, just persistent. Like it was trying to whisper to them. But the leaves didn't rustle, they rattled. Like bones caught in the canopy. Do you remember what we lied about? Nathan asked. Elise didn't answer, because they both already knew. It wasn't a single lie, it was dozens. The first time, they saw the red door in the woods and told each other it was just a game. The time they both heard Tam call for help and pretended it was the wind. The time they watched Kenny vanish into the house and told themselves he chose to stay. Little lies, survival lies. Lies that added up, built roots, fed this thing until it grew into something they could no longer walk away from. A low groan echoed from the trunk. A split in the bark widened, like a mouth opening. Inside it was hollow, dark, but inviting. Nathan looked at Elise. We have to go in. She didn't move. Or it'll keep growing, he said. She finally nodded, and together they stepped into the tree. Inside was not wood, it was memory. The walls weren't made of bark, but looping reels of moments they'd both tried to forget. The deeper they went, the more distorted the memories became. Faces with no eyes, voices looping in reverse, Tam running, but backward, always running back into the woods. Then came the lie. It hung in the center of the chamber like fruit, suspended, glowing. A single sentence, spoken years ago. We never saw her go in. Nathan reached for it, and the chamber screamed. Not aloud. Inside them. Guilt ignited behind their eyes, boiled in their throats. Suddenly they were children again, standing at the edge of the woods, Elise's hand in his. Tam walking ahead, and neither of them moving. Neither of them calling out. Then the echo of their own voices. We never saw her go in. The tree fed on that. It thrived on that. And now, to kill it, they had to take it back. Elise's hand shook as she reached forward. Together, they gripped the glowing sentence, and spoke. We lied. Everything went still. The roots beneath their feet writhed. The fruit turned black and fell to the ground, crumbling to ash. The chamber began to collapse. but not violently. Relieved, they stumbled out of the tree just before it cracked open, split down the middle by the weight of too many confessions. Sap poured like blood, thick and dark, soaking into the ground and vanishing. The names on the bark burned away, one by one, and as the last name vanished, Tam's voice echoed faintly in the wind. "Thank you." The tree groaned one final time and collapsed inward, not falling over, but imploding, as if the truth itself had robbed it of the weight it needed to stand. The field was still and green. Nathan fell to his knees. Elise dropped the notebook beside him, her chest heaving. A new page flipped. Room 6 closed. Then another. Room 7, the clock that forgot time. Neither of them stood, not yet. Because for the first time in weeks, the silence wasn't haunted. It was earned. But time, as always, waited for no one. And somewhere, far from the field, a clock had just started ticking again. Backward. The moment they stepped into the town, everything stopped, except for the things that absolutely shouldn't have. The rain hung mid-fall, frozen in delicate needles of silver above the pavement. A bird, wings outstretched, hovered mid-glide, beak open, suspended between breath and song. A paperboy with one foot in the air stood locked in place, eyes wide, mouth half open. His stack of newspapers hovering at his waist like he'd tossed them into water and they'd refused to drop. Nathan and Elise walked slowly, careful not to disturb anything, though the world around them looked far too fragile to touch. The deeper they went, the clearer it became. This place wasn't just stuck in time. It was trapped in a single moment, 2:17 p.m. Every clock they passed, on storefronts, in windows on wrists, pointed to the exact same time, and the notebook confirmed it. As they reached what seemed to be the center of town, a roundabout frozen in a swirl of stalled cars and mid-step pedestrians, the newest page read, Room 7, the clock that forgot time. Below it, another line appeared, one letter at a time, like a slow drip of ink from a pen being dragged through resistance. The town made one choice, one mistake, one lie. So the moment repeated until someone finally said it out loud. Nathan glanced at Elise, her face pale with a tightness around the eyes that told him she already had a feeling what that lie might be. They moved through the frozen town, weaving between people locked in place. One woman leaned out a bakery door, a tray of cookies in her hands, her face stuck between joy and surprise. A man on a bicycle was mid-fall, hands stretched in front of him. His shadow stretched unnaturally long across the pavement, like something behind him was pulling it forward. And then they saw it. The clock tower, dead center of town, looming angular, more like a spire than a traditional tower. Its face was cracked, but the hands were visible, stuck, unmoving. As Nathan stared up at it, the world around him flickered. Not visibly, but emotionally. He felt it in his gut like a déjà vu soaked in dread. They were already on the clock, even if it didn't move, even if it didn't tick. Somewhere behind the silence, the minute was counting down. Inside the tower, the air was warmer. Dust floated in stillness, untouched by wind. A winding staircase led upward, spiraling around the interior wall. Every few steps, photographs had been nailed into the stone. Sepia, toned images of the town, each with a small brass plaque bearing a year. But all the photos showed the same thing, people smiling in front of the tower, always at the same time of day, 2:17 p.m. Elise paused in front of one dated 1966. They've been stuck for decades, or longer, Nathan said. Each step upward made the air thicker. Time wasn't linear here. It was like climbing through layers of someone else's mind, peeling back repeats of the same decision. At the top of the tower, they found the mechanism, and the source of the problem, a man, alone, alive, and awake. He sat cross-legged on the floor, facing the giant gears of the clock, which had been deliberately wedged with what looked like bones, human, child-sized. The man turned slowly as they entered, as though he already knew they were coming. His face was lined, not just with age, but with guilt. His eyes were a bottomless tired, And when he spoke, his voice came out like dust, soft, dry, and filled with things he'd never meant to say. "You're late." Nathan hesitated. "We didn't know there was a deadline." "There's always a deadline," the man replied. "That's what time is. And when you break it, it breaks you back." Elise stepped closer. "You're the reason the town is stuck." He nodded unapologetically. "Because I lied. And the town let me." "What was the lie?" Nathan asked. The man looked toward the clock. "That we could get her back. That if we stopped the moment, rewound just enough, held the gears still long enough, she'd return." Elise's voice dropped. "Who?" "My daughter." He closed his eyes. "She died at 2:17. I wasn't there. I was supposed to be. I told myself if I could stop time, just once, I could rewrite it. But I was a coward. I didn't want to face the loss. So I jammed the mechanism, froze the world, forced everyone to wait with me." Nathan stepped forward, staring at the bone wedged into the gears. "You used her body to stop the clock." The man nodded again. "I gave her to the mechanism, so it would listen. You sacrificed the whole town." "I didn't mean to," the man whispered. "But they believed me when I said it would work. They followed me, and now they're all frozen, caught in the moment before the grief hit. It's safer here. No one has to feel it." "Not really." Elise held the notebook up, and a fresh line inked itself. "Only the truth unsticks the hand." Nathan looked at the gear. "We have to pull the bone." The man lunged up, suddenly panicked. "No. No, if you do, time will start again. It'll all come back. The grief, the pain, the loss." Elise stepped between them. "That's what makes it real." Nathan reached for the bone. The metal was cold. The gear shook beneath his fingers. And as he pulled, he felt time resist. The air around him warped, bending with soundless pressure, as if the moment itself was screaming. The second the bone came loose, the tower roared. Not with sound, with motion. The gear snapped forward. The clock ticked, once, just once. But it was enough. Outside, the rain fell. The bird flew. The paperboy screamed as his stack of papers crashed to the ground. And the people moved. Time restarted. The man fell to his knees sobbing, not from pain, but from release. "She's gone," he whispered. "I know," Nathan said. "But now so is the lie." They helped the man down the tower. As they emerged, the town pulsed with confusion. People held their heads, looked around. Many of them fell to their knees, some wept. Others just stood, stunned, realizing they had aged in a second. That the lives they remembered had been frozen decades ago. But they were free. Elise flipped the notebook. Room 7 closed. The next page bled slowly, hesitant, like it didn't want to reveal itself. And when the title appeared, it wasn't a room. It was a warning. Room 8, the name that should never be remembered. Nathan stared at it and whispered, "I think we just woke something up. Some names are meant to be spoken. Some are meant to be carved into stone, etched into memory, repeated like mantras to keep stories alive. But then there are names like this one, not meant for voices. A name that clings to the air like wet ash, staining the inside of your lungs the moment you try to breathe it." This wasn't just the next room. It was the room that all the others had been trying to avoid. Like a shadow cast across the entire house, even before Nathan and Elise opened the book. And now that shadow had noticed them. It started the moment the name appeared, half-formed, scrawled in uneven ink at the top of the notebook's newest page. Not a full word, just fragments, loops and slashes. And yet, even unfinished, it hurt to look at. The letters seemed to move, twisting when you blinked, slipping away when you tried to say them aloud. And with every minute that passed, the name grew more complete. "This one's different," Elise said quietly, her hand shaking slightly as she closed the notebook again. "It's not a room, it's a person." Nathan didn't respond right away. His thoughts had gone quiet. Not the stillness of peace, but the silence that comes before a scream. His heart beat slower, heavier, like the air itself had thickened. They were no longer heading to a place. It was heading toward them. The motel lights flickered, not the normal kind of flicker, the hesitant dim of faulty wiring. This was deliberate, rhythmic, as if the light was being sucked out of the bulbs, one syllable at a time. The air conditioner stopped. The clock radio reset to 0 Their reflections in the bathroom mirror began to lag behind, then freeze entirely. And then, a knock at the door. Not loud, not frantic, just certain. Elise froze. Nathan stood. He approached the door and pressed his eye to the peephole. No one was there, but when he pulled away, something whispered from the keyhole, directly into his skin, "Don't speak it." He backed away. The notebook fell from the bed and flipped open on its own. The name had added 2 new letters, still not complete, still awful. "Is this a test?" Elise asked. "If we say it, do we lose?" "No," Nathan said. "We become part of it." They left the room immediately. Didn't even pack. The car's engine turned over with a sound like teeth grinding. The radio turned itself on. Static. Then a voice, his voice, but pitched low, unnatural, repeating the name. Half-spoken, glitched. And something inside Nathan responded. He slammed the radio off, but the sound kept leaking from the vents, from the glove box, even from the tires on the road. That night, they stopped at a rest station. Couldn't risk falling asleep. They took turns watching each other, but Nathan kept seeing shapes in the corners of his eyes, shadows that didn't move with the wind. At 2:12 a.m., Elise gasped awake, clawing at her throat. "I heard it," she whispered. He looked at her. She was crying. "I heard it. Someone said it. In my head." A cold wind blew across the lot. And when they turned to the rearview mirror, the name was there, written backward, in condensation, almost finished. The next morning they drove through 3 towns with no names, no signs, no people. Only open doors, and behind every door silence. Then, at the base of a long road that hadn't existed on any map, they saw it. A house, not the house, but a house, shaped wrong. Too many windows, no roof, walls built from doors. No 2 alike. Some old, some new, some steel, some painted pink like they belonged in a child's bedroom. The structure leaned slightly to the left, as if listening. The notebook quivered. They opened it, and now the name was complete, but blurred, unreadable. And one final note appeared beneath it: "Speak it, and you'll feed it. Read it, and you'll find it. Write it, and it becomes you." Nathan looked at Elise. Her lips moved. "Don't say it," he snapped. "I wasn't," she started. But the wind interrupted her. A low hum, like a throat preparing to speak. The front door of the house opened, without anyone there. And from within came a voice that wasn't a voice at all, just presence, heavy inside them, carving itself into their bones. "Someone already said it," Nathan whispered. The wind picked up. The notebook's page curled at the corners, the ink bleeding as though weeping. And then Elise stumbled back. She looked at him, eyes wide, mouth open. She was trying to scream, but the name was in her throat, choking her. He caught her, held her upright. "Don't say it," he begged. "I'm not." Her lips moved again, and this time he heard it, not from her mouth, but from his own. The name, spoken like a cough, like a burp, like something trying to get out. The world blurred. The notebook burst into flame, and from the center of the house a shape stepped forward. No face, only a name, etched across its chest, a name they now both knew and would never forget. The house screamed, and the world broke. There was no sound when the world broke, just absence. Like someone had erased a note from a song, and the melody forgot what it was supposed to become. 1 second Nathan was standing with Elise at the edge of that wrong built house. The next he was lying on something soft and warm, staring at a ceiling he didn't recognize. It took longer than it should have to realize the ceiling wasn't solid. It was moving, breathing. He sat up slowly. The room pulsed in time with a heartbeat that wasn't his. A smooth red light glowed through the walls, which seemed to be made of stretched fabric, or maybe skin. Not human, but close enough to make him sick. Shapes pulsed beneath the surface. like something was swimming just beyond reach. Elise, he whispered. No answer. His name, what was his name? His thoughts recoiled. The sound of it was there, in the back of his throat, but when he tried to push it forward, it turned to dust. Like a dream too long forgotten, where the edges dissolved when you reached for them. Then he felt it. Something missing. He stood quickly, wobbling as the floor bent beneath his feet, like walking on a massive lung. The door ahead of him, if it was a door, was made of stitched-together photographs. Dozens, hundreds, all burned around the edges, the faces smudged. Some were children, others adults. One of them was his, but younger. Eyes wide, mouth open in mid-scream. The photo twitched. He opened the door. What lay beyond wasn't a hallway. It was time, folded into a spiral, walls of memory stretching upward like a rib cage, forming a tunnel lined with voice. Not voices. Voice. Singular, but fractured. His own. Speaking sentences he'd never said, choices he never made, moments he had never lived, yet remembered. He was walking now. Forward. Though there was no gravity, no floor. Only memory. One moment he was 10 years old, kneeling beside a broken bike while someone screamed in the distance. Then blink. He was 15, watching a house burn from a hilltop, holding a lighter. Then blink. He was standing at his mother's bedside, hands shaking, the doctor's voice saying words he couldn't understand. All of it him. None of it real. A voice echoed, "You fed me your name. Let me return the favor." Then came the flooding. Names filled his ears. Thousands. Millions. Names that didn't belong to anyone anymore. Names like poison. Names that had once carried love, rage, guilt, shame. Names eaten by it. And beneath it all, he heard a scratching. He turned. Elise stood behind him, but not as he remembered her. Her eyes were glowing faintly red, her hair shorter, her expression blank. "Who are you?" he asked. She tilted her head. "You don't remember me, do you?" He backed away. "Why can't I say my name?" "Because you gave it away," she said. "To the named thing. You whispered it without meaning to, and now it has you." "But you're—" she smiled. "I was Elise. But here, inside this place, I'm only what you remember. And right now, you're forgetting me." He collapsed to his knees. No, I remember you." "Then prove it." The spiral shifted. The walls peeled back, revealing a theater stage surrounded by mirrors. Every seat was filled with copies of Nathan, some clean-shaven, some bloody, some weeping, others laughing manically. In the center of the stage, a single microphone. A voice called from above, "Speak the name." Nathan stood. The audience of selves leaned forward, hungry for his mistake. He walked to the mic. Trembling, he could feel the name in his mouth. Waiting, yearning to come out, to complete the forgetting. But he paused, thought of Elise, her real smile, her real fear, her real voice when she called his name after the second room collapsed. He gripped the mic, and instead of saying the name, he screamed his own. "Nathan." The theater erupted, not in applause, in howls. The audience writhed, their faces tearing open to reveal rows of teeth. The mirrors cracked. The stage splintered. The voice above screamed, recoiling. "You don't get to keep it," Nathan growled, hands clenched. "It's mine." Elise, the real Elise, burst through one of the mirrors, blood on her palms, eyes full of light. "I remembered you," she shouted. "Even when it tried to rewrite you." They ran, through the collapsing spiral, through burning memories, through grief wearing their families' faces, through everything, until they burst through a wall of light and woke up in the motel, gasping, both holding the notebook. The page was blank. Then, one word appeared. Roommate closed. And beneath it, in tiny script, a name is only powerful when you forget who you are. Nathan clutched Elise's hand. She squeezed back. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. "You didn't," he said, voice raw. "But I almost lost myself." The next page began to turn, but neither of them looked. Not yet. Because for the first time, they understood. This house didn't just trap people. It took identity, rewrote it. And the next room would ask for something even harder to hold on to than a name, hope. It began with a smell, faint, almost sweet like old lilacs turned to dust. Then the cold came. Not the sharp kind that bites at your fingers, but the quiet chill that seeps through skin and burrows into bone, reminding you that something has left and isn't coming back. That kind of cold meant the house was preparing its most cruel trick. And Nathan knew, even before the notebook opened, that whatever waited in the next room wasn't just another memory, or name, or echo. This one wanted something much harder to fight for. Hope. The page turned itself. There was no fancy title, no grand description, just a single broken sentence scribbled in the margins like someone had tried to erase it halfway through. This is where they all gave up. And beneath it, the number 9. Nathan and Elise didn't speak as they walked. They didn't pack anything, didn't check the car. The motel behind them no longer looked real. Flat and dull, like a backdrop from a play long since abandoned. The world around them had stopped pretending to care. The air tasted like ash. Trees stood motionless, brittle as if made of paper. And every sound, each footstep, each breath, echoed far too loud, like the world was hollowing out. They arrived at the field just after sundown. There was no structure, no door, only a crater, wide, endless, black. Something had fallen here, or maybe been pulled in. The wind circled around it but never touched the center. The grass near the edge was gray and brittle. At the rim of the crater sat a single object, a bench, wooden, worn, waiting. Etched into the backrest was a phrase that made Nathan's stomach tighten. "Rest here if you're done." Elise sat anyway. He didn't stop her. The notebook opened across her lap. The page had changed again. New handwriting this time, thinner, jagged. Slashed across the paper like it had been written in a hurry, all stories end. Some just forget to close. Nathan remained standing, staring into the pit. Then slowly from within, the sound began. Not music, not voices, moments. He heard a child laugh. Kenny's laugh, from the summer they first explored the woods. Then Tam's voice, saying I'll catch up, like she had that last day. Then his mother, whispering it's okay, while fading in a hospital bed he hadn't remembered until now. The pit was pulling hope out of them by the thread, not yanking. Unwinding, Elise was crying now. Silent, steady tears that traced lines through the dirt on her cheeks. "I feel it," she whispered. "I feel it leaving." Nathan took a step back, but the edge of the crater moved with him. "It's not a place," he said quietly. "It's an ending." The bench creaked under Elise's weight. Maybe it's better to stop. Maybe we've done enough. Closed enough doors. Nathan turned sharply. "Is that you saying that, or the pit?" Her eyes met his, and he saw it. That faint, flickering glow that had kept them both alive through the worst of it. Dimming, he knelt beside her, took her hands. "We can't stop here. But I'm so tired, I know. But if we stop, we don't go back to before. We don't go back at all." She closed her eyes. "Then what's left?" He looked toward the crater. The blackness shimmered slightly now, like oil on water. From its depths came a low, rhythmic pulse, like the beat of something ancient and dying. "We go through," he said. She shook her head. "There's no bottom, no way out. Then we make one." The notebook flipped again. A new message appeared, this one written as if scratched by nails. "Jump, and you bring the fire with you. Wait, and the house swallows what's left." Elise stood. The bench vanished. They stepped to the edge together and jumped. The fall wasn't sudden. It was slow, weightless, like being forgotten. They didn't scream, didn't flail, just fell, through memory, through noise, through regret, down and down. Then light, just a flicker at first, distant, but real. Nathan reached toward it and landed, hard. He gasped, coughing up air that smelled like lightning. The ground was stone, cracked, old, sacred somehow. Around them a vast hall with no walls, only columns of smoke rising into nothing. Elise landed beside him, barely conscious. They were still alive, and the notebook had landed between them, warped, but open. Its page whispered room 9 closed. hope withheld, hope reclaimed. They had passed through the pit, not untouched, but whole, and the house, it knew. The next page opened itself, reluctantly, its ink blood red. Room 10, the boy who drew the end. And beneath that, a drawing, crude, childlike, of a red door, and a boy holding a match. The drawing was old, crumpled at the edges, water-stained, ripped across the bottom like it had been torn from a child's notebook in anger or panic. The lines were simple, but furious, pressed so hard they'd nearly torn through the page. A red door centered in a field of black scribbles. And next to it, the outline of a boy with no face. He held a match. The flame was the only color aside from the door. A jagged orange smear like the pencil had been pushed into the paper until it bled. Nathan stared at it for a long time. Not because he didn't understand it, but because he did. Too well. He'd drawn something like it once. A lifetime ago, he was 6. Alone in the living room while his parents fought upstairs. He didn't have the words to explain what he felt, so he grabbed the red crayon and started pressing it into the paper until the wax snapped. He remembered that pressure, that rage, that feeling that something, anything, needed to change. And in the middle of that emotion, he'd drawn a door, a simple red rectangle with no handle. He never showed anyone, but the next day, the tree behind their house split down the center like it had been struck by lightning, even though the sky had been clear. "Do you recognize it?" Elise asked. Nathan nodded slowly. "I think this is the beginning." They followed the notebook's guidance in silence. It didn't give directions now, only pull, and the world itself shifted around that pull, bending space and memory, shaping a path that couldn't be walked in the real world. The ground became blacktop, then gravel, then broken tiles. Each step echoed like it was being recorded and played back in reverse. They passed houses without windows, trees that whispered names, signs that were blank on both sides. Finally, they saw him, the boy. He sat in the center of a vast clearing where the sky had collapsed into itself. The stars above swirled like oil in water, each one dimmer than the last. The boy wore a striped shirt and had dirt-smudged cheeks. His back was turned, but Nathan could already feel it, the grief. Not loud, not dramatic, but constant, like a storm that refused to break. In front of the boy lay hundreds of pages, drawings, some finished, some torn. Each one showed a different version of the same thing, the red door, always changing slightly. Sometimes it was open, sometimes closed. Sometimes it floated in the air, other times it was buried underground. But always, it was wrong, like a wound the boy couldn't stop picking. They approached slowly. Elise knelt first. "What's your name?" The boy didn't look at her. His voice was flat, dry. "It doesn't matter." He took it. "Who?" Nathan asked. The boy finally turned his head. He had no eyes. Just deep, hollow spaces filled with graphite smudges. Like he had drawn over his own face to forget who he was. "The thing behind the door," he whispered. "I drew him. I didn't mean to. But I was mad, and he said he'd help. Said he could make the pain stop. All I had to do was open it." Nathan's throat tightened. "You drew the door, and it became real." The boy nodded. "He gave me a pencil, told me whatever I drew could be true. So I drew the door, and then I drew the house, and then I drew the fire." He held up the original drawing, its edges blackened, the red door barely visible now beneath the layers of ash. "I tried to burn it down," the boy said, "but I was a kid. I didn't understand. You can't burn stories. You have to end them." Elise sat beside him. "Then help us end it." He shook his head. "I don't have the pencil anymore." He took it back. He said only he can end it now. "Where is he?" Nathan asked. The boy's voice dropped to a whisper. "In the place between rooms, where nothing ever starts and nothing ever ends. You'll know it when you see it. It's hungry." The ground beneath them cracked. The boy looked down, panicked. "He knows I talked to you." The sky tore open, revealing not stars, but eyes. Watching, blinking, turning. Nathan grabbed the boy's hand. "Come with us." I can't, the boy said. I'm not real anymore. His fingers turned to ash in Nathan's grip, and then he was gone. But the drawing remained, and so did the fire. Elise grabbed the page and held it to her chest. The notebook flipped again, violently. Its pages caught the wind like wings. On the newest sheet, a message appeared, room 10 closed. Then another line, the door is real. The end is near. Burn what was drawn, or become what you fear. Nathan looked at Elise. She nodded, and together they turned toward the horizon, where the sky was bleeding red and a door was waiting. No walls around it, no house behind it. Just a single threshold, and behind it him. It stood by itself. No hinges, no frame, no structure to hold it. Just the red door, upright in the middle of a lifeless plain, surrounded by nothing, and yet anchored to everything. Its paint was cracked, bleeding flakes like dried blood onto the dead soil. The handle pulsed faintly, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. And the air around it, still, yet impossibly tense, hummed with a presence too large to see, like something massive was breathing just beneath the skin of the world. Nathan and Elise stood 10 feet away, close enough to feel it tugging at their ribs, close enough to feel their fear begin to rise in their throats like bile. This was the end. Not the final room, no. That would be too clean. This was worse. This was the Creator's creator. The thing that had whispered to a child and taught him how to make nightmares with a pencil. The thing that didn't live behind the door but was the door, the hinge and the threshold, the whisper in every room, the echo in every empty hall. And now they had come to meet it. Nathan took a slow step forward, holding the drawing, the boy's last piece, the one he'd tried to burn but couldn't. The page fluttered like it knew what was coming. I think we're supposed to use this, he said. I just don't know how. Elise didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the door's handle, watching it throb like a wound. Maybe we're not meant to use it. Maybe it's meant to use us. Nathan turned to her. You think we're bait? No. She shook her head. I think we're kindling. Then the door opened. Not a swing. Not a creak. It just peeled like the world itself was unzipping. And from the darkness behind it stepped something that wasn't a man, but wore a man's shape like a coat. Too tall. Too thin. Skin like parchment wrapped around bone. Eyes deep as pits with no light, no soul, no color. Just void. Its mouth didn't open, but they heard it speak. You made it farther than the others. Its voice was inside them, bypassing their ears, slipping into their thoughts like oil into water. Who are you? Nathan asked, though the question already felt small, meaningless. I'm what waits at the end of the story, the thing that lives in endings, in closed doors, in forgotten names. I don't need to be believed. I only need to be expected. Elise held the drawing close. The boy created you. The thing turned its hollow gaze toward her. He remembered me. That's all it took. I don't understand, Nathan said. You feed on belief. I feed on closure, on fear of the final page, on the lie that stories must end, that they can't change, that once the door is drawn, it can't be erased. I am the shape people give their hopelessness. It took a step closer. You're here because you believed the story was bigger than you, because you let it write you. You were characters, not people. Now, you can either burn with it or stop reading. Elise narrowed her eyes. We're not characters. You are, the thing said softly, until you decide you're not. The notebook opened by itself in Nathan's hand, pages flapping violently in a wind that came from nowhere, carrying names, faces, deaths, rooms, screams. Every room they had survived. All of it was there, every page written in someone else's hand. And the final page was blank. Waiting. Nathan looked at Elise. She looked at him. Let's stop the story, he whispered. They stepped forward together, right up to the thing that had stalked them through every corridor, every trick of memory, every unspoken lie. It watched them with curiosity, as if amused. Then Elise took the drawing and pressed it to the door. Nothing happened, until Nathan pulled out the match. One single, burned match. The one from the boy's drawing, found tucked behind the notebook's cover. He struck it, and the flame didn't flicker. It screamed. The drawing caught. The door pulsed once, then again, like a dying heart. The creature's shape flickered. "Stop," it hissed. "You need me. Without the story, you have nothing. No meaning. No purpose." Nathan smiled, tears streaming down his face. "We never needed a story. We needed a way out." The fire spread from the page to the door to the creature's limbs, climbing like ivy. It didn't burn like wood. It burned like paper soaked in gasoline. Fast, furious, final. The thing howled, dozens of voices overlapping. All the people it had taken. All the stories it had ended. Screaming not in pain, but release. Because even endings can get tired. The door collapsed into ash. The creature folded into itself, and the ground cracked open beneath their feet. For a moment, Nathan and Elise felt the world vanish. Then, silence. Not the haunted kind. Not the expectant kind. Just peace. They woke on grass, real grass. The sky was blue, not blood red, not filled with eyes. Blue. And the notebook lay between them, no longer full of pages. Just one. Room 10 closed, and beneath that story ends. You don't. Nathan sat up and looked around. No door, no house, no echo.
Just possibility, Elise laughed.
A full, broken, real laugh. "What now?" she asked. He took her hand. "We write something better." And they walked away, for the first time not toward a room, or a trap, or a lie, but toward a world that hadn't been written yet. And this time, they'd hold the pen. It should have been over. When they left the field, there was no wind behind them, no notebook, no door, no more voices whispering through vents or names scratched into bark, just sky and road, and the kind of silence you get only when something has truly died. They didn't run. They didn't rush. They walked slowly, like people leaving a grave, because in a way they were. But something followed. Not a shape, not a shadow, a feeling. Like being watched by your own memory. They found a diner just before sunset, sitting at the edge of a sleepy town neither of them remembered passing through. The windows were fogged. The bell above the door didn't ring when they entered, and every table was already set for people who hadn't arrived yet. Elise ordered coffee. Nathan didn't. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. "You feel it too?" he asked. She didn't look up from her mug. "The quiet that isn't quiet." He nodded. "I think it's still dying," she said. "And dying things don't let go all at once." A woman brought them their order, middle-aged, bright smile, apron stained with flour and something darker. She didn't ask for payment, didn't blink when Elise's hands trembled or Nathan's eyes darted to every mirror in the room. As she walked away, Nathan caught sight of something tucked in her pocket. A match, old, burnt at the tip. Exactly like the one they used to set the drawing on fire. He stood quickly. "Where did you get that?" The woman turned, confused. "What? In your pocket," he said. "That match. Where did it come from?" She reached for it, pulled it out, studied it with a frown. "This? Been in there forever. No idea where it came from." But her voice was wrong. Not unnatural, not twisted. Just off, like a familiar song played in the wrong key. "Are you okay?" Elise asked. Nathan didn't answer. He was already moving, past the counter, toward the back hallway. It was dim, lit by a single flickering bulb. Too long for a diner this size, too narrow. The floor beneath his boots had started to shift again, not tile, something softer. Wood. His breath caught. Elise. She was beside him in seconds. The hallway kept going, farther than it should, the walls now papered in old drawings, crude. Familiar. The red door, the tree, the motel, the boy, and one last image newer than the rest, them. Nathan and Elise, drawn in charcoal, eyes hollow, standing in front of a house that hadn't burned. "Someone's still telling the story," Elise said quietly. Someone kept the pages. They reached the end of the hall. There was a door, not red, not warped, but unmistakably wrong. They opened it, and stepped into a room filled with ash. Thick, ankle, deep ash. It wasn't hot, Not fresh, it was ancient, dead, and rising out of the ash like a monument. The notebook, burned black, but intact, waiting. Elise stepped forward first. As her hand touched the cover, the world shivered. The pages flipped open. No wind, just will. Inside, scrawled in frantic, childlike handwriting, he left a piece of himself here. Then, a story doesn't need a door. It only needs a reader. Nathan backed away. No, we ended this. We burned it. But Elise was shaking now, eyes wide, not in fear, but recognition. Nathan, she whispered. This isn't the house's story anymore. He frowned. What do you mean? She looked up at him. It's yours. The ash around their feet stirred. Something rose from beneath, shapes forming, vague at first, then sharpening. A hallway, a motel room, a tree with names. All of it, his memories, his guilt, his unfinished pages. The house hadn't survived, but the fear had. And now it was rewriting itself through him. You're the pen now, Elise said, voice cracking. You believed it was over, but you never stopped carrying it. It fed on that. It grew. Nathan's breath caught, because she was right. Every nightmare, every whisper, every flicker in the corner of his eye since they escaped, it hadn't been the house coming back. It had been him keeping it alive. The notebook pulsed in Elise's hand. A final page began to write itself, but the ink wasn't black. It was red, thick, fresh, alive. He stepped toward it and saw his name at the top. His name written in red didn't just sit on the page. It bled through it. Letter by letter, it carved into the paper like it was alive, as though each stroke had been slashed open rather than penned. Nathan didn't want to look, but he couldn't turn away. There was something final about seeing it there, centered, untouched by smudge or flame. Nathan Michael Hale. Full, clean, claimed. The air around him grew heavy, the silence deeper than any he'd known in the house, in the rooms, in the impossible spaces they'd passed through. This silence had mass. Wait. Judgment. Elise stepped back from the notebook, her hands trembling, eyes fixed on the name. It's not just remembering you anymore, she said. It's writing you back in. Nathan felt it. Not pain, not possession. Something worse. Permission. It had been waiting for him to notice, waiting for him to want to understand. And now, the story was folding in on itself, crawling back to the source. Not the door. Not the boy. Not even the creature behind the threshold. Him. And it made a kind of sick, perfect sense. He had carried the notebook, fed it, survived its trials, replayed the rooms in dreams, in thoughts, in whispered fears. It needed a survivor to sustain its next chapter, and who better than the one who had seen all of it, bled through it, named it. I didn't write this, he whispered. But you didn't stop reading, Elise said, her voice soft. She was right. Every time he remembered a room, described it to Elise, spoke the names aloud. They had been stitches in the next draft. The house didn't need to exist physically. It only needed to be told. The structure was memory. The walls were words, and he'd never truly closed the book. Just delayed the chapter. The ash shifted beneath his feet, forming a spiral. Rooms, 10 of them, and in the center him. The notebook flipped again, pages blank. The red ink waiting at the corner of the cover like a tongue behind teeth. Don't pick it up, Elise said. Please? But it was too late. He had to see. Had to know. Nathan reached down and touched the spine, and the notebook opened, not to a page, but to a mirror. Not of his face, but his thoughts. Scrawled, messy, terrified. Regret spilled across the parchment, each sentence an echo of a moment he couldn't take back. I left them. I let the door stay open. I think I wanted to go back. And at the bottom of the page, in tiny, delicate handwriting, you never escaped. You only rewrote the escape. The ash climbed higher, curling around his legs now. Pulling, not with force, but with comfort. As if it was saying, this is where you belong. This is the story you made. Elise grabbed his hand, yanking him out of the spiral's center. Nathan, listen to me. You're not what it wants you to believe. You're not the house. He looked at her. Really looked. And in her eyes was the one thing the house had never truly held on to: choice. "You get to choose what this means," she said. "You get to stop telling the story." The notebook trembled, pages flapping wildly. Screaming, he could hear voices again. Tam, Kenny, the boy, the woman in the diner, the creature himself. Each one begging him to finish the sentence, to give in, to give form. "I don't want to write it," he whispered. Elise nodded. "Then don't." And with shaking fingers, Nathan did the only thing the story had never expected. He closed the notebook. The ash stopped rising. The spiral cracked. A wind rushed through the room, real wind, for the first time in forever, and with it, the drawings tore from the walls, each one disintegrating midair like old leaves. The notebook burned without flame. Not red, not black, just gone. And in its place silence. Not the weight of judgment, but the stillness of release. Nathan collapsed to his knees. Elise held him. There was no final door, no message, no last page. Only light from the ceiling above, soft and unfamiliar. They rose together, without fanfare, without ceremony. And when they stepped through the hallway again, it was just a hallway, paint chipped, tiles cracked. No drawings, no echo, no house. Outside the diner, the world was ordinary. Sunlight, people, a breeze. Nathan looked at his hand. No ash, no ink, no words. Just skin. "Real, Elise?" he said. She turned. "I think I'm finally done reading," she smiled. "Good, because I think it's time we start living." And they walked away, not from a house or a story or a curse, but from the weight of someone else's ending. This one, this was theirs. For a while there was peace. Not the dramatic kind with orchestral closure or poetic sunsets, just the real kind. Nathan and Elise moved into a small apartment above a bakery in a town that didn't have a name worth remembering. The air smelled like sugar and burnt coffee. Mornings were slow, afternoons even slower. At night, the world went quiet by 9. And that quiet wasn't watching them anymore. Nathan got a job fixing windows. Elise spent hours drawing. Not the red door or the ash-filled rooms, but real things. Cats in alleyways, children on swings, things that lived, things that didn't need to mean anything. For a while, they pretended the story hadn't followed them, and for a while, they believed it. But memory doesn't care about endings. It waits. Quiet, patient. And then one day, it speaks. It began with a dream. Nathan stood at a mirror that showed nothing. No reflection, just a dark hallway behind him, flickering with candlelight. He turned, but the hallway wasn't there. He looked back, and the mirror still showed it. Only now there was something else. A notebook, blackened, smoking, sitting on a table that hadn't existed the moment before. He woke drenched in sweat. Didn't tell Elise. He told himself it was just the past trying to claw back. That dreams didn't have weight. That ghosts didn't hold pens. That when they burned the notebook, they had burned the truth with it. But the next day, he saw the first mark on the bakery window, etched into the glass with something sharp and ugly. "You're not done." He didn't scream, didn't react, just stared at it for a long, long time. He cleaned the glass himself before Elise could see. That night, he didn't sleep. 2 days later, the neighbor's kid drew something in chalk on the sidewalk. Nathan smiled at first, just a child's messy scrawl, a tree, a swing, a sun. But in the corner, a red door, and beside it, a figure holding a match. When Nathan asked the boy who showed him that picture, the child shrugged and said, "I didn't draw that part. It was just already there." The next night, the dream returned. Same mirror, same hallway. Only this time, when he turned to leave, there was a voice. "You stopped the fire, but not the story." Nathan began sleeping with the lights on, and still didn't tell Elise. But secrets don't stay quiet for long. One morning, she found a sketch folded between the pages of her journal. Her own drawing, done with her own hands. Only she didn't remember making it. It was Nathan, standing alone in the motel parking lot, eyes blank. Behind him, a door opening, not red this time, black. and from it a single word emerged in jagged lettering: rewrite. She didn't ask questions. She packed a bag. Found Nathan on the rooftop with a cigarette he didn't know how to smoke. "It's back, isn't it?" she asked. He nodded. "I tried to ignore it," he said. "But it's not the house anymore. It's something worse." "What?" He looked up at her. "It's the story trying to fix itself." Because that was the truth, wasn't it? When you break a narrative, it doesn't just disappear. It repairs. Finds cracks in the walls of the world. Slips in through dreams, reflections, symbols, forgotten names. And if it can't use you anymore, it finds someone else. A child with chalk. A woman with a match. A stranger staring too long at a page. The story doesn't die. It waits for a better reader. So what do? Elise asked. He dropped the cigarette. Watched it bounce off the edge and vanish into the alley below. "We stop pretending we're out." She clenched her fists. "You mean go back?" "No," he said. "We don't go anywhere." "Then what?" "We find it before it finds a new author." Because it would. Of course it would. Something like that doesn't go away. It gets hungry. It adapts. And this time, it wasn't offering a pencil or a notebook or a house with numbered rooms. It was offering something far simpler. A second draft. And it had already started writing. The ground was soft again. Not the literal dirt and soil kind, but something deeper. Like the earth beneath their feet no longer remembered how to hold weight. Every step Nathan took felt uncertain, like the road could vanish under him if he thought too hard about it. And Elise, she'd stopped talking altogether. Not from fear, from calculation. She was drawing again, constantly, images she claimed not to remember making. Scratched onto napkins, receipts, notebook margins. Always the same thing, repeated in different forms: staircases that led nowhere, doors with no handles, eyes watching from beneath floorboards, and once a room labeled Audrey. They didn't make a plan. They couldn't. Whatever was pulling them now wasn't a location. It was a direction, a pressure, a throb beneath the skin of the world, guiding them forward like gravity. It led them through towns that didn't appear on maps, past gas stations with no pumps, motels with only room 9 available, diners where the waitresses didn't blink when Elise's fingers bled from drawing too hard. And at every stop, the signs became harder to ignore. A library where all the books had blank covers and identical titles: narrative. A television screen that played only static, except when Nathan passed, and it whispered, "Turn the page." A child's voice in a park reciting words from room 3 like a nursery rhyme. She bled into the carpet, and no one noticed. All these signals, all these breadcrumbs, leading them not backward into memory, but forward into construction. Because this wasn't a haunting, it was a rebuild. The house wasn't trying to reopen the past, it was designing a future. It happened outside New Berlin, at a rest stop abandoned since the 90s. Nathan pulled off to stretch, rubbed the ache from his shoulders. Elise didn't speak. She hadn't all day. But the moment she stepped out of the car, she dropped to her knees and began to draw, on the pavement, with a stick, like a child in the dirt. At first Nathan thought it was another door. It wasn't. It was blueprints, meticulous, angular, technical, and in the center their names, not handwritten, stamped. "Room odor," she whispered when he crouched beside her. "That's where it begins. Not the first room. Not even the basement. Before all of it, the blueprint. The idea." Nathan ran a hand down his face, feeling the weight return. "What does it want from us?" he asked. She looked at him then, eyes hollow but sharp. "It wants to be built right this time. It wants fewer mistakes, a better structure, stronger symbols, a cleaner loop." He stood and backed away. "You're not just describing it anymore," he said. "You're helping." She didn't deny it. "I think I always was," she said. "From the motel, the sketches, maybe even before that. I think I've been carrying Room 100 with me for years." Nathan stared at the drawings, the precision of them, too perfect, too exact. Not guesses, memories. "Elise," he said quietly, "what if you're the architect? She blinked, once, then nodded. I think I was supposed to forget that part. The wind picked up. But the drawings on the ground didn't blow away. They held. Because they were never made of dust. They were made of belief. He felt it then, like a hammer inside his skull. The story was no longer satisfied being remembered. It needed co-authors, needed agents, needed hands to shape it. Elise, he said, stepping back. Heart pounding, what happens when you finish the sketch? She didn't answer. She just drew the final line. And the ground beneath them trembled. A door appeared, not physical, not painted, outlined, floating 6 feet off the ground, red glow, no frame, just a presence. Elise dropped the stick and whispered, "It's starting." Nathan grabbed her wrist. "Then we have to stop it." She looked at him with something colder than fear. "We can't." "Why not?" "Because I already built the front porch." The trees around them groaned. The sky dimmed, not like dusk, but like the sun was being unwritten. In the far distance, something rose. Not a house, not yet, but the shape of one. Walls forming in silhouette, windows winking into place, a roof stretching wide. Room by room, floor by floor, a new version, a better draft. One not haunted by memories, but powered by intent. And somewhere deep inside that shape, Nathan knew, Room Hodger was waiting. For them. For the next version. And this time, they weren't just visitors. They were the design. There was no door when they stepped in. No knob to turn. No threshold to cross. One moment, Nathan and Elise stood on cracked pavement, wind slicing through their jackets, and the next, they were inside something in progress, a place between frames. It wasn't darkness, and it wasn't light. It was something rawer. Like the air hadn't decided whether to exist or not. The walls weren't wood or brick or even memory. They were sketches. Thin lines floating in space, shifting in and out of focus like the blueprints were trying to remember themselves. And in the center of it all, just a few steps ahead, Room Hodred waited. It didn't look like the others. No false door, no screaming floorboards, no hidden mouths in the wallpaper. Just a white outline glowing against a pulsing gray void. It was featureless, lidless, hungry, and worst of all, it recognized them. The closer they got, the more Nathan felt it, like a hand was reaching through his chest, flipping pages of his life without permission. Childhood guilt, the motel, the girl with no name, the hallway with no end. All of it played like a slideshow across the walls that hadn't formed yet. Elise stopped walking, her breath shallow. "I drew this place," she said, "before I ever saw it, when I was a kid. Just bits of it, corners, angles. I thought I was making it up. But I wasn't. I was remembering." Nathan turned to her. "Remembering what?" "That we've been here before." The sentence shattered something in him. Not disbelief, recognition. Like his blood had been waiting to hear it. He looked around again, and suddenly it all clicked. The déjà vu. The way the rooms always bent toward his worst thoughts. The notebook that seemed to know him better than he knew himself. They hadn't survived the house. They'd been built by it. Room Hodred wasn't the start of the house. It was the house's first successful attempt at people. Nathan dropped to his knees. "It used us," he whispered. "Not to feed on. To learn from. It needed to know what fear looked like, what guilt tasted like, what trauma did to a soul. And then it used all of that to build this." Elise didn't deny it, because the walls around them were beginning to thicken, the lines deepening into structure. Nails appearing midair, screws turning themselves. Beams slotting into place like they were rehearsing a memory they'd rehearsed 100 times before. They were standing inside a concept that was becoming real. "Why now?" Nathan asked. "Why not before? Why come back after all this time?" "Because we were the first story," Elise said. "The prototype. And now that it knows how to tell us," she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. They could already feel it. Room Hodred pulsing in time with their heartbeats, sensing with their breath, rewriting itself to match their rhythm. If they stayed here any longer, It wouldn't be the house becoming more like them. It would be them becoming more like it. Nathan stood, trembling. We burn it again. Like last time. Elise shook her head. It's not made of pages anymore. You can't burn thought. Then what? She met his eyes. We forget. He blinked. What? That's the only thing it can't survive. Obscurity. If we leave, if we forget it, if no one remembers it, if it has no audience, then the story dies in its crib. Nathan looked back at room 100. It was forming faster now, chairs growing from the floor, shelves growing spines, a table setting itself with utensils that reflected their own faces. And if we can't forget, he asked. She stepped closer to him, took his hand. Then we make sure no one else ever finds it. We bury it in silence. But it was too late, because behind them, a child's voice rang out. Is this the place from the drawings? They turned. The boy stood in the unfinished doorway, the same boy who'd drawn the first door. Except now he was whole, eyes bright, face clean, alive, and curious. I followed you, he said. You were in my dreams. Elise's grip on Nathan's hand tightened. No, she whispered. Not again. But room 100 had already reacted. The walls pulsed. The structure groaned eager. A new reader had arrived, a new witness. That was all it needed. Elise ran to the boy. You have to leave. Now, before it sees you. But the boy didn't move. He looked past her, right at room 100, and smiled. I want to help. The floor beneath him folded into stairs, lifting him gently. Nathan shouted, Don't look at it! But the boy did, and room 100 blinked open like an eye. Not a door, an iris, and the boy stepped inside. No, Elise screamed, running after him. Nathan grabbed her before she could follow. But inside room 100, the boy had already vanished. The doorway sealed, the walls turned solid, and the house exhaled, finished. Nathan fell to the ground again, breathless, defeated. Elise stared at the now closed door, hollow. Her voice, when it finally came, was barely human. It didn't need us to finish the story. He looked up at her. It just needed us to start it. There was no door handle, no way to knock. Room 100 didn't wait to be invited in, or to open for those who knocked politely. It chose. And right now it had chosen the boy. Somewhere beyond that solid wall of air and memory, the house was rewriting itself around him. Nathan didn't know what was worse. The possibility that the boy was being shaped into the next storyteller, or that he already was. The air around them was thicker now. Breathing felt like sipping from tar. Light didn't reflect naturally anymore. It bent, flickered, bounced off invisible walls. Time was slipping sideways. Elise tried to sketch an exit with her fingertip in the dust, but the lines rearranged themselves the moment she blinked. We can't leave, she said. Not with fear. Not with grief. Just a plain, cold truth. Nathan wiped sweat from his brow, trembling. Then what? We wait while it uses him. We go in. Nathan stared at her, heart pounding. Into room 100. Elise nodded. We wrote the first story without knowing. Now we go in and finish it knowing everything. But we're not the authors anymore, he said. We're the material. Exactly, she whispered. That's why it's scared of us. And somehow he believed her. The walls of the house pulsed once, hard, like a muscle contracting, and the door to room 100 didn't open so much as fold away, as if reality had peeled back and invited them into a thought that wasn't finished. Nathan stepped forward. Elise followed. Room 100 was endless, yet claustrophobic. Its walls were made of shifting scripts, passages from every moment they'd lived inside the original house. Words flowed across the surfaces like blood through veins, some in languages they didn't know, some in their own voices, some in screams. And in the center of the room, the boy sat at a desk, writing, a pencil scratched across paper, fast and furious, eyes wide, sweat dripping from his nose. The desk was lit by a single hanging bulb, swaying slightly, casting a circle of golden light around him like a spotlight. Elise called out, "Stop." But the boy didn't look up. Nathan walked toward him, slowly, carefully. "What are you writing?" The boy didn't answer. His hand moved faster now, pushing hard enough that the pencil began to splinter. Then he whispered, "I have to finish before the reader stops." Nathan froze. What reader? The boy's eyes flicked up. And in that moment, Nathan understood. It wasn't about the house. Not the rooms. Not the doors. Not the drawings. Not even them. It was about you. Whoever was reading the story, whoever had been following the journey, page after page, waiting to know what happens next. Room 100 wasn't just a trap for the characters. It was a mirror for the audience. And the story couldn't end until the last sentence had been read. Elise rushed forward and grabbed the paper from the boy's hands. He screamed, shrill and unnatural, like something not born of lungs. The light above flickered. The ground buckled. A sound like tearing skin filled the air as the walls began to peel. The script bled. "Don't let it finish," Nathan shouted. "Tear the page!" But Elise looked at it and saw something else. Not a story, not a trap, a map, lines of what would come next, what the house wanted to be, how it would escape into dreams, into symbols, into the next forgotten place where fear festered. It didn't need a location, just a reader. And as long as someone wanted the end, room hoders would always be ready to write it. Elise looked at Nathan. "We don't destroy it." He blinked. "What? We trap it, in the only place it can't rewrite." Nathan shook his head. "Where?" She placed the page back on the desk. Then she sat, picked up the pencil, and began to write. Nathan understood. Room 100 needed a story to breathe. But if the story never ends, if it loops, if it stays in flux, uncertain, always one sentence away from a conclusion, it can't feed. He took the second pencil beside her, sat down. Together, they wrote the same first line over and over, endlessly. "This is the room before all others. This is the room before all others. This is the room before all others." And as they wrote, the boy faded. The house began to fold, not violently, not dramatically, just quietly. One wall after another slipping into white. The voices hushed, the bleeding script dried. And for the first time since the motel, Nathan felt something close to peace. The trap wasn't sprung, it was contained, by their choice, by their will, and Rue Moser, it would never finish. Because now, the authors had become the prison, and the story was frozen in ink. Oniar Latiar, a girl in a school library, pulls an old notebook from the shelf. The cover is blank. Inside, only one sentence is written. Over and over, "This is the room before all others." She frowns, flips the page, nothing. Then, the light above her flickers. She hears a breath, a soft whisper, a pencil scratch, and then, just barely, at the very bottom of the second page, a door is drawn. No color, no name, no handle, just the outline, and a match tucked in the spine, waiting.